Good evening and a very, very warm welcome to you in Radioland at home and abroad on Facebook at WICEQFM or at Q95 FM Radio. That's where you can find us on Facebook. So please share the live and invite your friends to join the Q family. Yeah, get the latest breaking local, regional, and international news and happenings. We certainly acknowledge you on the several other online streaming platforms. So this is the Global View on Q. So it's Tuesday, 19th October, and it's 7 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. It is the 40th Tuesday of 2021. I'm your host, Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G, but I'm delighted to have with me tonight distinguished guest, Dr. Irving Andre in Canada, political scientist, Dr. Dion George in Atlanta, Mr. Alvin Thomas in Georgia, and attorney Gabriel Christian in Maryland. The topic tonight is going to be around issues and pitfalls facing fledgling democracies in small island developing Caribbean states like Dominica, and the way forward out of the dilemma that they found themselves in, as it were. We will look at issues of likability. We will look at notions of bribery and treating and what we call in Dominica SEO, and dependency on handouts and on gifts and things at election times versus knowledge and experience and competence and accountability and transparency. So we will also examine the critical role of colleges and universities and institutions like those and intellectuals, sustained advocacy for free speech, access to public sector information, the impacts of religion and religious beliefs, the strengths and the weaknesses of the private sector, the trade unions and other agencies, the question of fear of intimidation, victimization, oppression and repression, and the pushback on political culture and narcissistic type leadership. We will examine the imperative for political education, which I think is very badly needed in Dominica, to say the least. Modern electoral and campaign finance laws and regulations. We hear that a new game might be coming soon. We're still waiting to hear what's happening from that. And eliminating big money of unknown origin from election campaigns. We will discuss, as usual, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the dangerous. We will talk about the populist leaders in the Caribbean. There have been many, many of them, a long history of populist leaders in the Caribbean region. We'll talk about the legacy of this populism, the erosion of human rights under these populist leaders. And then we have to deal with the question of what kind of leadership qualities do we really need today in Dominica and the Caribbean. So we will examine the way forward for Dominica after looking into the rearview mirror on lessons that we ought to have learned during the era of various populist leaders in the Caribbean and the ominous trends of nolly-crossing democracies like we've seen in Dominica in recent times. But what can Dominicans and friends of Dominica and the Caribbean at home and abroad do to help reverse these worrisome trends? We are delighted, as I said, to have Dr. Irving Andre, Dr. Dion George, Mr. Alvin Thomas, Attorney Gabriel Christian. Tonight, we discuss, we make recommendations for the way forward, and we do so as usual, no anger, no malice, no personal attacks, no vilification, no divisiveness, just simply bringing back civility, a caring society, good governance for Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. So wherever you are in Dominica, in the region and globally, join the conversation and stay tuned to this space, get the answers to your questions on the Global View on Q. Have your say as you do every Tuesday with me, Mr. G, only on Q95, the big station. So as usual, we say a heartfelt thank you to our healthcare providers and frontline workers. I'm sure they will continue to be exhausted as they are, but I expect that they will keep on working to help stem this rising tide in this escalating and expanded deadly coronavirus situation in Dominica. See, my understanding is that the latest report says that we've had death number 30 over a period of 2 to 3 months. Quite alarming. So please follow the correct advice, the guidelines and protocols. Play it safe, stay alive. Happy to have you with us tonight, wherever you are in your neck of the woods, in Dominica, in the region, in the global community. Please write down these numbers: 767-449-3095, 3096, or 3097, 767-616-4257. Or if you're overseas and you'd like to call the overseas number, it's 305-432-9624. We will take your calls a little later. Our engineer Sheridan Norris is keeping us on the air. And Lambert Lambi Charles, the indefatigable Lambi Charles, is on the console at Q95 directing the traffic as usual. He will direct your calls to us a bit later. But we have to alert you to the fact that this is a big day for this man Lambi Charles. Today is his birthday. I want to extend a happy birthday to you, Lambi. Hope you're having a great one with the family. Don't overdo it, but have a great one, Lambi. Talk about that later on. So let's get started. However, I want to go as we get started. First to Dr. Irving Andre to start the ball rolling and get the conversation going. We will not always, of course, all of us see everything the same way, and our listeners and callers are free to differ with anything that we say here tonight, but we'll all agree to disagree respectfully, as there is always room for different points of view. So I also look forward to hearing a few minutes of opening comments from Dr. Dion George, Attorney Gabriel Christian, and Mr. Alvin Thomas, right after Dr. Andre. So I asked Dr. Andre, if you have not yet opened up your mic, please do so. And then let me go over to you now, Dr. Andre.
Good evening, Mr. G. Good evening to my fellow participants, panelists. Good evening to your listenership, Mr. G. And good evening to all those who seek to perhaps listen to views which may or may not reflect their own. And it seems to me that many of your radio hosts, Mr. G, and your various programs have made a point of saying that all views must contend. And I hope that we give more than lip service to that assertion, to be quite frank with you. We're talking about populism, we're talking about governance in the islands, and it is my intention to give you a very brief historical perspective. Perhaps we will start within the period following the emancipation of slaves in 1834. And certainly in Dominica, as in the other Caribbean islands, you had post 1834 what is referred to in the history books as the mulatto ascendancy. In other words, those owners of small estates, those professionals in Roseau, were able, as the plantation system met its demise, were able to assert the authority not only in the economic life of Dominica, but also in the legislative council. The champion for democracy within the 60s, 1860s, or thereabouts, 50s and 60s, was Charles Falconer. There was a famous case where he was held in contempt and imprisoned. Suffice it to say that the case went right up to the Privy Council, which ultimately ruled in his favor. But throughout the 19th century, 1860s, 17th, 18th, and 90s, there were two forces that struggled for ascendancy in Dominica. One, you had the consolidation of wealth by the so-called traditional mulatto middle class, encompassed in Roseau for the most part. But secondly, you had the increasing poverty experienced by ex-slaves and their descendants. And these ex-slaves and their descendants, they reacted to that increasing and persistent poverty through migration to many regional destinations, including Trinidad and Tobago, British Guyana. Some of them found themselves in the late 19th century gravitating towards the Panama Canal to work on the Panama Canal. Later in the early 20th century, there was a persistent migration of Dominicans, impoverished for the most part, to Cuba, to the Dominican Republic to work in the cane industry, to Curacao in the 1930s and later in the 1940s. So that is how a significant number of Dominicans reacted to persistent poverty in Dominica. Politically speaking, throughout the 19th century, there was a constant fight between those colored persons who were in the legislative council and the colonial authorities. There was a struggle for increased representative government. And the slogan, for the most part, particularly by the late 19th century, was obviously no taxation without legal representation. That fight culminated in the late 19th century with the conflagration in La Plaine, where a number of persons who were killed who were protesting the fact that although they had literally no voice in the electoral process, they were forced to pay taxes. In the 1890s, the colonial government reintroduced Crown Colony government, which basically placed all the sinews of authority into the hands of the colonial authorities, thereby dealing a severe blow to the aspirations of the colored middle class in Dominica. In the early 20th century, the fight for representative government continued. In the second decade of the century, that fight came to be led by the brilliant lawyer, Trinidad-born, but certainly Dominican, C.A.A. Rawle, and his efforts, along with a number of other persons, culminated in constitutional changes in 1924, which saw the formation of a number of electoral districts and enabled Dominicans, based on limited adult suffrage, that is to say, you had to have a certain amount of property to vote, which led in that year, 1824, the election of a number of persons, distinguished persons of wealth, landowners, to the Legislative Council. That process continued from 1824 to about 1932. The aspirations for increased representative government were frustrated because those who had been elected found that they were representatives of the people in name only, that they had very little independent power in Legislative Council. In 1932, as we know, there was this big West Indies conference led by distinguished sons of the soil, C.A. Rawle, Ralph Nichols, J.B. Charles, Shillingford Howell Shillingford, and others. But nothing seriously came out of that because the 1930s were characterized by severe, excruciating poverty engendered by the Great Depression of 1929. In the late 1930s, the British Commission did a commission of inquiry in the islands to find out the extent of poverty. It is otherwise known as the Moyne Commission. And nowhere, or in Dominica, the members of that commission, in no other island did they find poverty to be so deeply entrenched. No other island than Dominica. So that served as an impetus for change. Obviously, those changes were put on the back burner with the advent of World War II. Within Dominica in the mid-1940s, you had the flowering of a type of indigenous labor movement with the formation, for example, of the first union led by Emmanuel LeBlanc and Nichols, Harold Nichols. I've referred to him, and unfortunately he died in that very same year. There was also a Methodist minister. His last name was Belboda, and you can imagine how Dominicans butchered his name to give it their own interpretation, but we need not go into that out of it. 1951 was a pivotal year because that is when we had the advent of universal adult suffrage, where every person, irrespective of how much property they had, could vote. And in that election, pivotal, we had, although the vast majority of persons who were elected to the Legislative Council, including people like R.B. Douglas and some others, we had for the first time a person of very humble beginnings, a woodcutter, who was elected as part of the Legislative Council. If my memory serves me right, he was from Woodford Hill. And Emmanuel LeBlanc boasted that he was the first person to ensure that a barefoot man got elected to be in the Legislative Council. That process of change was accelerated in 1955 with the formation of the Dominican Labour Party by Phyllis Yarolfrey. And 2 years later, with the advent of Nan Ducre and Edward Oliver LeBlanc. There was an election in 1957. It was literally tied. Willis Alfrey, who was a Fabian socialist, but who was still very much tethered to the Dominican elite. He tried to arrange a marriage of convenience between Harriet, what's his last name again? Dupini, who led the other main party. And suffice it to say that members of his own party, such as, if I recall correctly, Flaubert Laville, or was it Lionel, they bolted on the cover of darkness to the other side. And that precipitated the typically Dominican phenomenon of persons elected on the one platform, bolt into the other party, perhaps after receiving a message from God. But in any event, so in the 40s and 50s, in other parts of the Caribbean, with the advent, as I said, of universal adult suffrage, a number of local populist leaders emerged. There was Uriah Butler, labor union leader from Trinidad and Tobago. There was Albert Marichal from Grenada. Robert Joshua, I believe his name is, first chief minister of St. Vincent. There was, of course, Bear Bird from Antigua. There was Bradshaw, Robert Bradshaw from St. Kitts, and a couple others. There was Gary, obviously, from Grenada. Afterwards, Gary and Bradshaw, they had some affinities because Gary had learned Unionism in Aruba. In fact, he was deported from Aruba after trying to unionize oil field workers. Bradshaw spent some time in Curacao, and when they came back, obviously armed with working in a different territory, seeing workers, not agricultural workers, but industrial workers, they had the insight and the necessary street creds to gravitate towards the political arena. And we saw the flowering of that type of leader in the 1960s and then the 1970s. We all know, of course, of Edward Oliver LeBlanc. We know of his roots. We know the personal circumstances in 1957, which propelled him into the political arena. We know his ultimate ascendancy in 1961, when he defeated the Frank Barron-led DUPP. We know of his policies in the 1960s, populist policies. Policies to give opportunities to working class Dominicans, farmers or gardeners who had been shafted to a significant degree by the authorities, who were given avenues to sell their crops, who were given avenues to send their children to school, who were given avenues to market their produce by the provision of feeder roads, who were given an opportunity to reclaim their dignity by a recognition of their indigenous culture. And that was not just restricted to Edward Oliver LeBlanc. We know that Mabel Oderal, traditional middle class, her husband, if I recall correctly, was from Venezuela. He also did a lot to propagate folk songs from 1949 onwards and so on. But Edward Oliver LeBlanc was the catalyst. And we know also that with his populism, with his almost overarching control of the electoral process, because bear in mind, in 1966, he defeated his nemesis, the DUPP, 10 seats to 1 in the 1966 general elections. 10 to 1 is murder, politically speaking. But that itself, with the almost elimination of the opposition, you had opposition emanating from the newspapers, the voice of the traditional middle class then, the Herald. The Star, led by Felicia Alfrey, who had teamed up with Emmanuel Leblanc and who became a thorn in the side of the Dominica Labour Party, led by Oliver LeBlanc throughout the 60s and early 1970s. We know what happened in 1968. And here, for the first time, we are confronted with the perils of a populist leader. Edward Oliver LeBlanc, specifically through his minister, Mabel Maya James, enacted the 1968 legislation, which would have, to some degree, curbed press freedom. That created a backlash. It ultimately led to the formation of the Dominica Freedom Party. It ultimately led to a coming together of the forces opposed to the populist philosophies and policies of Edward Oliver LeBlanc. In 1970s, populism took a more sinister turn, not necessarily in Dominica, but in Dominica to some degree. We know what happened in Gary's Grenada. Under Gary started the phenomenon known as squandermania, the lavish and flagrant spending of money for no rhyme or for no reason. The twisting and the bending and the co-opting of the sinews of governance to suit one's own personal and political ends. In St. Kitts, we had the phenomenon of Bradshaw. Bradshaw was caricatured in a famous short story of V.S. Naipaul. Bradshaw with his Rolls Royce, Bradshaw with his buckled shoes, as a la British aristocracy, Bradshaw with his gold swizzle stick. So the West Indian populist leader by the 1970s had become a caricature of himself. And that to a significant degree. It gives us an insight as to the perils of a populist leader. We had our own issues in Dominica throughout the 1970s. We had the confrontations throughout the 70s with the what was then called the CSA. And I'll leave that to Alvin. He knows much more about that than I do, for God's sakes. We had the growth, particularly with LeBlanc's resignation in 1974 and the ascendancy of Patrick John in 1974. We had a tightening of the opposition around the two central forces, Shah of Iran on one hand, Mary Eugenia Charles on the other. With the advent of political independence and the drive towards it, that opposition intensified. Obviously, in many respects, Patrick John was a populist leader. We've heard about his background. I need not go there. We also knew, and we also know, and we recognize, and we address it head on. Those policies that show that he was not immune from the perils of populism, to making himself a colonel of the Dominican Defense Force. The repetition throughout the 70s, documented in my biography, documented by relying on his own words. I say that because I've heard a criticism that Gabriel, Christian, and Irving wrote a book without any input from Patrick John. Wrong. It's a distortion. It's a fairy tale. In the same league as Snow White and the Seven Bears. Or is it Seven Manacles? Whatever, it doesn't matter. We have his utterances in the House of Assembly throughout the 70s. We have his utterances on political platforms. We have his utterances in newspaper articles. We saw, based on any objective analysis, that he was not immune from the perils of populist government. There's no doubt that many of his policies serve the working class, schools, non-profit housing. And today we can probably appreciate those houses more because at least those recipients, they got titles to their properties, for God's sakes. So there was no legal extortion hanging over their heads to vote for PJ on pain of not getting title to their property. So we can see it in a much better light today than we could see it in the 70s. So this whole notion of likability, popularity, and so on, it has its own pitfalls. We haven't even said anything of the Haiti situation with Papa Doc and so on. He was a populist leader, middle-class fellow, a doctor, for God's sakes, one who had sworn to save the lives of people. Rather than saving the lives of people, he came up with an acute idea, the Tonto Makut. Gary had his own mongoose gang. We flirted with some of that, but we didn't go to that extreme because we had our own special constable. About 12 of them resigned in 1975. So we appreciate that while a leader should always have the support of people, we have to avoid the cultism that we now see in the United States. We have to avoid the cultism that we saw in Haiti, the cultism that we saw in Grenada, because we understand that if allowed to go unchecked, it will eat itself. It will cannibalize itself. That's what's happening in Grenada in 1983. That's what's happening in, well, I don't know what's happening in Haiti now based on the macabre images of death, extrajudicial killings that we're now seeing in that country. But bear in mind that who are we to cast the first stone? Because only today I saw a video of a group of young boys, our own little mongoose gang in the making, beating up some defenseless guys with sticks. And when Good Samaritans stood and questioned what they were doing, they accused the Good Samaritan of disrespecting them for God's sakes. Dominica is a small country. It's going to be interesting to see if any of these young hoodlums are arrested and charged by our police forces. So this is not some abstract discussion in terms of popularity, likability. This is a very necessary discussion because it is very relevant to us here today. It is relevant because we have to ask ourselves, how do we treat those who have different views? Do we tar them with feathers? Do we excoriate them? Do we persecute them? Do we ostracize them? Do we treat them as enemy, public enemy number one? Once we start doing that, we're on a slippery slope, the road to no return. And the only way we can reverse that trend is for good people to stand up and be counted. And this is where I take my exit in terms of my introduction, Mr. G.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. But I wanted to just explore a little bit further because I imagine that Dr. Dion George, when he comes on next, he will probably go a little bit more in depth and relate some of the historical developments that you've seen, that you've spoken about, that you've exposed here. When you looked at what is happening in Haiti, starting from there and coming down. I mean, got so many leaders and it's all the same thing. I mean, the same thing has been happening for years, for generations. And we've seen what is happening on the other islands, but we see what is happening also in Dominica. And so we ask ourselves, have we learned lessons from what we've seen in those countries? And you spoke about these kids, but what about police brutality? We've seen things happen in Dominica by the police. We've heard people dying in police custody. We see that people cannot demonstrate anymore. It is difficult to have a demonstration, and Alvin will talk to us about that when he comes up to speak. So it seems to me that there are lessons to be learned, but are we learning those lessons? And then when we speak about likability, Eric Gary was probably a likable fella. Baby Dog and Papa Dog were probably likable people. I mean, all these guys were probably very likable. They were probably good-looking fellas. But look at where it's got these people in those countries. Are we doing the same thing? Are we making the same mistake? Looking for people who are likable, who in fact may not be cutting it? Because where are we today vis-a-vis St. Lucia, vis-a-vis Barbados? I mean, is our political education allowing us to make the kind of, decisions that help us to improve the quality of our lives and the standard of our living? Because it seems to me that what I'm hearing now is that in Dominica, things are not better off today than they were 15 to 20 years ago. Many people don't seem to think that they're better off. And I know that Dr. Dion George will take us through and to explain some of those things to us. But it seems to me that going forward, we have to learn from those lessons because I don't think there's any Dominican who want to see Dominica become another Haiti. So, Dr. George, I want to go over to you for you to, take us from there, from where Dr. Andre left us. Over to you, Dr. George.
Okay, good evening, Mr. Gregoire. Happy birthday, Lambi. Happy birthday to you, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Wonderful good evening to the listening public of QFM. Special good evening to the people of Salisbury, Dominica. And of course, when we have these conversations, we are looking to educate and inform, and hopefully good decisions can come out from our conversations. And so, of course, we want to invite the Holy Spirit, who is the fountain of all knowledge, into our discussions. Well, with the issue of likability in Dominica politics is something who has been over the media for the past few weeks. I think it's relevant, but as a political scientist, I feel that I would be doing a disservice if we address the subject from a tangential or a parochial viewpoint. Therefore, my approach would be a holistic one with some theoretical underpinning, but yet also pragmatic. Pragmatic, I mean, in approaching the subject and asking ourselves some basic questions. For example, why are we discussing this topic this evening? And is leadership or leadership style and effectiveness of leaders, is that important for Dominica? If so, why? And what could the impact of possible leadership? So let us examine from some global examples and see if we can make these applicable to Dominica. And I guess the last section I would like to deal with is that we can examine how leaders process information. And I guess we can conclude by saying what is a good leader, what is a bad leader. And then, of course, the whole issue of third parties in small developing states. Obviously, I think that is relevant. I think it's very timely because of the recent actions with the ADP and so forth in Dominica. And so I would like to start off, Mr. Gregoire, with, I think, the best knowledge I know, which is the Word of God. And for those who miss Mass on Sunday, I will tell you the reading was taken from Mark chapter 10, from verse 35 to 45. And it says this, if you can allow me 1 second. It says that James and John, the son of Zebedee, came to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And Jesus replied, "What do you wish me to do for you?" They answered him, "Grant that in your glory we may sit one at your right and the other at your left." And Jesus said to them, "Do you know what you are asking? Can you even drink the cup that I drink?" Anyway, I will pause there. And I will pause there because if we have to continue reading that section of the Bible, essentially what was happening there, as we all know, that there are 12 disciples. But apparently James and John were asking Jesus that when he reached in his glory, to put aside the 10 and have one James and two John, one on his left, one on his right. In retrospect, they were looking for vision. And so, if I may continue, when the other 10 heard of this, they became indignant at James and John, and they were furious. And Jesus summoned them and said to them, "You know that those who recognize as rulers over the Gentiles, they see themselves as lords over the Gentiles, and they treat them with authority, and they let them feel their power. But it shall not be so among you. Rather, whoever wishes to be great among you will be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you will be slaves to all. For the Son of Man did not come to serve, but to serve, and to serve as a ransom for others." My dear friends, I say this to somehow give an underpinning of what a leader should be. A leader is one who is willing to serve, not to let their subjects feel their power or to be lord over the other. In fact, I think the great teacher himself, he turned it around. He told them that if you want to be number one, you have to first be willing to serve. And so, as we have this discussion about populist leaders and voting people because of likability, like I said, I think the approach should be a holistic approach, both theoretical and both practical. I think his food is on, yeah. And so the first thing I would like to do is, one, to look at this question of likability from an academic perspective. And there is something in political science which is called the psychological mechanism of leaders. In other words, how do leaders process information? This is also referred to as the idiosyncrasies of leaders. So how do they view things and how do they react to what they view? And there are several techniques. I'll mention a few. One of the ones I think that is important to mention is something called cognitive consistency. And what that means, it is the tendency to accept information that is compatible with what has previously been accepted, often ignoring the inconsistent information desired to be consistent in attitude. And so what that means in perspective is this. For example, just before Japan attacked the United States at Pearl Harbor, indeed, the US soldiers did see some planes, but they ignored it. They said that's just normal. They were thinking that it's normal, although it was inconsistent. And so there is a view that where you see inconsistent things happening often, it's no longer inconsistent. And good leaders should make sense of that. Another point I think that is worth noting in terms of how good leaders should entertain information is something called groupthink. And groupthink is the whole idea that thoughts process whereby small groups form consensus and resist criticisms of that core position, often disregarding contradictory information. To put in our local parlance, if, for example, that the Labour Party has a particular position, or let's just be quite frank, even the opposition UWP party, and someone were to come with a different perspective and say, for example, that whilst we are thinking of that as a good position, can we consider an alternative? The groupthink would basically push them off. They would disregard their view. And they would think, for example, that they must stay with the consensus. This is negative. It's not good for leaders to be surrounded with groupthink. It's really important that good leaders think outside the box as well. The other one I think that makes sense is something which is called satisficing. Not satisfying, but satisficing. It's the whole idea. It's a tendency for groups to search for what is good enough, a solution, rather than what is the optimal solution. And so, for example, let's just say that the government of Dominica does something, and their supporter says, oh, that's good, and everybody sing kumbaya. And that it might be good, no criticism to the government, but the question is it the optimal choice? And is there areas for improvement? Are you willing to consider other alternatives that can make your good position even better? And so there are other psychological mechanisms that are used to process information that perhaps I can refer to later. But I just wanted to mention these three in my introductory comments to show that leaders need to think not in terms of a tangency of the edge or parochial, meaning very narrow, but to think broadly and often outside the box. The next thing I would like to undertake is the question of how can we as political scientists or researchers analyze a leader's impact. And so often I have heard recently on QFM, the whole question of likability and is that person a good leader, and what about their personality traits, should they consider another leader, and all this topic. But I think it's timely, a discussion, and I think in all fairness, it should be dealt with very directly. And so there are three areas that political scientists have identified that measures and analyze the way a good leader can be identified. In other words, what can make a leader shine? Interestingly, these are external, but I will come to the personal traits in a second, but they are also external factors as well. The first one out of three is a leader can come out as being a champion, as being very effective when the political institutions are unstable, when the political institutions are young, and when the political institutions are in crisis. I heard the good Dr. Andre mention Gary and these populist leaders, and he's right on point. Because, for example, in countries like Dominica, if the economy is unstable, if the electoral process, the electoral commission is not effective, that there are questions about the legality of elections, and a leader can come out and provide some assistance to certain people, he or she might be viewed as a strong leader. Where the political institutions are unstable and a leader can come across and provide some semblance of stability, the people in need tend to respect them. Also, where a political institution is young, consider, for example, Iraq, when the US tried to somehow, virtually, I guess, create a democracy there. You saw what happened. But say, for example, that a leader was able to do that, he would have come out as a strong leader. And the third criteria is where the political institutions are in crisis. Consider Haiti. Haiti is in crisis. Right now, Haiti has 17 Americans hostage, asking for 17,000 US for each. And I think there's one Canadian as well. If a leader were to come here and stabilize that, he would go down in history as a great leader. Even in the United States, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, that's the closest the world ever got to having a nuclear war. And it was because of the personality trait of the youngest president the United States had, the first Catholic, Kennedy. It was because of his temperament and negotiation with the Russians that the world avoided a conflict. And so, although he died very young, he was seen as a good leader because he was able, in crisis, to avoid a disaster. The other area in which leaders can come out as being successful is when institutions have very limited constraints. And so what does that mean for Dominica? Well, let's consider. Are there terms of length of office for the person in the highest chair, or for the persons in the highest chairs? Can we say, for example, there are 2 terms for the leader, or is it a lifetime tenure? And what political scientists have observed, where there are limited constraints meaning that they are very loose regulations, leaders are able to come out as being very effective. And this is consistent in very dictatorial, tyrannical governments. And the third area in which leaders seem to be effective is where the information is ambiguous, the situation is ambiguous, or where it is unusual. And a good example of that would be when, for example, Barack Obama decided to invade Pakistan, clearly violating all international law. He wasn't sure what to do. If it had failed, he would have been criticized for the rest of his life. But because it was a successful endeavor, it was unusual, it was ambiguous, but he made a call. And they did that. He ended up coming out like the champion. And so these are the external factors that let a leader shine. Now, here is the big question. The big question that has been going over the air recently. What about likability? And what about persons' individual personal traits? Is that a factor? And what does that mean for small island states like Dominica? There have been talks about certain persons in government, that persons can reconsider their attitude, their behavior, etc. But have we even taken a test? How do we measure that? And have anyone measured it? Or are we just speaking of our opinions? Well, I will start by telling you that Barack Obama, he lost his first senatorial race for the state of Illinois, where he was living in Chicago. He lost. And he lost to a guy who was not as educated as him, but the guy was a grassroots sort of Black power liberation guy. And Barack Obama came across as a intellectual, academic, not in touch with the people kind of guy. And he lost. But I'm not criticizing him, because that was just the reality. But he learned from it. And in fact, when he won his second time around, he expressed that he learned very deep from what he heard. And so he came across as being too intellectual. So what he did, he softened up. And he started working with grassroots organizations like Munsewi or the lawyers group, started working with people. And then he won. So I guess the question remains is, can leaders in the Caribbean learn something from that experience? Now, on a more, I guess, deeper level, and on the question of likability, I guess the ultimate question is, how do we measure it? Is there a way to measure it? And the answer is yes. There is a political psychologist by the name of Margaret Herman, who found that there are a number of personality characteristics that affect good leaders. And the methodology that she used was pretty unique. She argued that leaders, especially top leaders, it's very rare and seldom that you will find that they will take a personality test. Sometimes they don't want people to know their idiosyncrasies. Sometimes they want that to remain covered. So what she did is she set up a method where she systematically collected spontaneous interviews and press conferences of over 80 head of states from 38 countries between the years of 1959 to 1962. And she analyzed them and she came up with certain benchmarks to measure leaders' likability and leaders' personality traits. And these benchmarks includes, one, nationalism, which she said that this is having strong emotion ties to the nation, emphasizing national honor and dignity. She mentioned perception of control. That's another characteristic. of personality trait. The belief in the ability to control events. How much you think you can deal with a company negotiating to be part of your island development state? How in control do you feel you are? Do you feel like you have a high control over the situation? Or are you always on the buying end of negotiation? She mentioned the need for power, the need to establish and maintain projects and have influence over everything. And so whether it's a devolution project in the eastern part of Dominica in the country or somewhere on the western side, but the central government feels the need to say who gets hired, who gets the project, the need to have power, the need to maintain projects over the entire nation? Or do you trust that persons can make decisions on their own? The other one is, okay, so I'll leave that alone now. And the last point I want to talk about, I guess I can as well come back to that. But the last thing I would like to talk about is the whole idea of third parties in small developing state. And I want to mention that because of the recent events. And quickly, I will just mention that, yes, third parties are important for three main reasons. One, they represent the social and economic interests not voiced by the major parties. They have potential to influence the two parties to address issues that has not been dealt with. And finally, third parties have what is called the spoiler effect. The spoiler effect, I think, is major. We can always revisit that later. But just a quick example of it. Say, for example, that there is a race in a close constituency like Salisbury, and let's say Salisbury have 50% workers, 40% labor, and you have a third party coming in, and they get 10% of that. Say, for example, the 10% came from the United Workers' Party, they could spoil the United Workers' Party chance of winning. And so probably later we can come back and revisit that. But third parties make a tremendous impact in small democracies. So with the interest of time, I will stop there for now.
Thanks, Brother Dion. Again, and Brother Irving Andre as well. I don't know whether Gabriel is with us. I wanted to get some opening comments from him if he's with us. Gabo, you know, we've heard so much that Irving has mentioned earlier, and then your brother Dion mentioned quite a few other things which are very relevant to Dominica. He mentioned the whole question of housing policy, mentioned competence. In other words, he was looking at the whole notion of likability and sort of juxtaposing that against notions of competence and experience and the ability to get results and performance and accountability and transparency, and how we handle ourselves during elections, whether we engage ourselves in bribery or treating and those kind of things. He mentioned something about the housing policies. I think Brother Andre mentioned the question of, you know, what is happening now. Houses are going on. People are wondering whether they're going to get titles or not. They're wondering who's going to maintain the houses and those kinds of things. You know, he also mentioned things like what happens with big money in election campaigns and third parties. Gabriel, I know that there are a number of other things that you would like to conduct. I'd like when you get a moment as you make your comments here to touch on a few of those things, but I also have to remind you of something that I saw that may have piqued your interest. This passport business there seems to be really going astray now. It's getting out of control now. I know this Antigua is having some issues now with people having these passports, and Dominica seems to be having issues. And I understand, Gabriel, maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this. But a gentleman by the name of Montfraret, there's a newspaper article that seems to be tying him in some way with the financing of this uprising in, where was it? Benghazi, I think it was. So maybe Gabriel, if you unmute your mic, just turn your mic on. So yes, so let's.
A pleasant good evening to you, brother Sheridan. And before I go any further, it wasn't any uprising. It was a terrorist attack on the U.S. Embassy. in which 4 American citizens were killed. And that attack was funded by Ali Riza Montferrat. Let me repeat. The attack on the U.S. Embassy, it's coming out now, that about $8 to $10 million was brought to Benghazi by no less a person than Dominica's ambassador, Ali Riza Montferrat. This is where we are, in 2021, as we approach another anniversary of independence. What independence? What independence? I'm here on this program with Irving Andre. Irving Andre and I became friends during the independence movement. There was a gentleman by the name of Alvin Thomas at that time. I think he was at the St. Mary's Academy. Quite bright gentleman. He never been at the forefront, but I know that as a progressive person, he also believed that as a people of color, we had the ability to rule ourselves. Is that the example we set into the world? But before going into any details on that, Brother Sheridan, let me just thank you and Q95 for a wonderful opportunity to try to educate our public. I want to just also thank God for the life of our brother at Master Control, Brother Lambie. Brother Lambie, I wish that God blesses you with many more years, not only in the studio where you keep us together and you allow for voices to be heard by many, but also that with your family and with your friends, that you continue to be a beacon for technological mastery, the relevant technology of radio communications, but you also maintain the friendships that really make for a sense of community. Because when we talk about political leadership, it's not simply an issue of being partisan, UWP, Labour, APP, DFP, or no P at all. It's about trying to use this forum to educate our people about what my father used to always call duty. My father believed in duty. As a matter of fact, as an old British soldier seasoned in the colonial cliches of the time, he was always fond of reminding us of Lord Nelson's admonition to the sailors on the battleship Victory right before the Battle of Trafalgar. And the British are always fond of passing those little things along. Nelson said to the sailors, gentlemen, there were no women in those days, it wasn't about equal rights. If you're a sailor, you're male. Tomorrow, you're going into battle against the French, I believe. England expects every man to do his duty. During the battle the next day, he was mortally stricken. And with his dying breath, he said, thank God, I've done my duty. Dominicans, we've transferred our allegiance from the Queen of England or the King to our country's leadership. Is our country's leadership dutiful towards us? Are they ruling our island justly? Are they ruling our island with principles of integrity, honesty? When we have a situation as follows, within this week, my fellow Dominicans, my dear friend, Brother Dion George, thank you for your wonderful and majestic elucidation of the requirements of good governance. My dear brother Irving, thank you very much for giving us a treatise in the development of Dominica's political apparatus from the days of slavery, the days of the Brown ascendancy, to the days of universal adult suffrage. And Brother Thomas, I remember you not only at the Academy, but also in your days in trade unionism as a significant leader, and I believe what was then called the CSA, Civil Servants Association. So thank you for being here tonight with us and in helping to bring some luster to this gathering. But I want to remind all of you that we're here not because we want to be liked. Some of us have not had a meal all day until late. We're here because we have a sense of duty towards our country. We love our country. We love Dominica. And yes, we love people in the Labour Party too, like Skerritt. We love him. We don't love him to vote for him because he does not deserve the vote of righteous men and women or intelligent men and women. But we love him for one reason. We love him because we're human beings. And we don't want him to go to jail. And then someone says, well, boy, Gabriel, did you not talk to the man and tell him something? Did you try to warn him? Did you try to caution him? What did you do? Were you there clapping him and jumping up and hooray, hip, hip, hooray, and so on in the CO, taking the contracts that were not tendered, being part and parcel of the bon temps, as they say in Creole? What did you do with your intelligence? Were you dutiful to your education and your training to caution the government of Dominica? To say to the government of Dominica, you know, guys, our father taught us 4 things. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't follow bad companions. Old police, you know, don't follow bad companions. What did he mean, Sheridan? What do you think he meant when he said, don't follow bad companions? Then he would say also, don't be home, be home before 6 o'clock, because in Dominica, 6 o'clock, the sun is down, and you don't want to be caught by zombie and so on, those kinds of things. You have all these folk tales of, people being bought and sold. These are residues of slavery, people being bought and sold. But these essential principles in my practice I have seen made manifest. How? I would say maybe a good 80 to 90% of the people I've represented in criminal cases are people who were in the wrong company. And what is the company that we keep? What is the company we've been wanting now for more than a decade now? Sheridan, more than a decade. Have we not? There was Tona, Czechoslovakia. That didn't stop them. There was Maduke, Nigeria. That didn't stop them. There was Lapsang, China. Caught red-handed, jailed. Money launderer. That didn't stop it. Who else? There was Corallo, the famous ambassador to the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, who did not plant one fig in Dominica, one fair or patata Dominique. He didn't plant one zebgua grass in Dominica. I mean, my partner's not as good as yours, Sheridan, but I remember some of those things. Lambert maybe knows more patois than I do, but he didn't plant anything, but yet he is the ambassador of Dominica, United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization. He was arrested by the Italian police in St. Martin. The scamp, the rascal, he was arrested. And Ali Riza Monfared, famous ambassador, who was living at Mont Daniel. Is it Mont Daniel or Mont Bruce? Mont Daniel. Spreading joy. Is that what they call it? Spreading joy, having parties and so on. He is now named in the New York Post as the money man behind the terrorist attack on the US Embassy in Benghazi. So the New York Post, they're naming your ambassador as the money man for the Quds force that attacked the US Embassy in Benghazi. So the New York Post. Political magazine this week in Washington excoriated Zampoli. Who is Paolo Zampoli? They said that he brought Sodom and Gomorrah to Washington. Let me repeat, so political. That is your ambassador in Washington, a man who not one Dominican community meeting has he ever attended to say what he's doing as ambassador for the seas. Dominicans, you have more guts than fish, Dominicans, to gather around and talk about independence. The independence that Irving and I and others, like Alvin Thomas, Dion wasn't born yet, was quite small. We were there, Alvin, were we not? I see you laughing. It's not a laughing matter. We were there. We were there. We were proud to be there and to be seen, our country marching forward. And look at where we are now. I take this moment to remind our listening audience about colonialism. Colonialism was a human enterprise with all the good and all the bad of all human enterprises. What were the bad things? Slavery, strong colony government where we did not have a right to have a voice in our affairs, but we struggled against those things. We had trade unions. We got universal adult suffrage. We were able to elect our own leaders. We were moving towards self-government. Self-government was our right, or liberty was our right. Those were the bad things, that which we were denied. But what were the good things? Wasn't there a benefit to having a cocoa industry? Wasn't there a benefit to having sugar mills? Wasn't there a benefit to having factories making soda pop and juices and so on? Wasn't there a benefit to having a botanic gardens and agricultural stations where you could go and get your plants and you could be productive? Wasn't there a benefit in having a stock farm where we had a milkery, a stock farm producing milk? Those things were under colonialism, but it was born of our own indigenous enterprise and creativity. And oftentimes in the colonial struggle, we forgot that we were obligated, we were duty bound rather, to take out of the colonial experience those facets that were beneficial, while discarding those facets of racism and colonial exploitation and slavery and class prejudice that were inimical to our eyes. You see, we were supposed to use, Brother Sheridan, our intelligence to be discriminating. And now, where we've attained the degree of learning, we have people like Alvin Thomas, superbly educated. Dr. Dion George, a professor. In one day, Dion George brought me to lectures in 4 universities. This Dion George, I thought I would lala out, as they say in Dominica, on the field. 4 universities in one day. Clark University, Georgia Military Institute. I'm forgetting all the others now. This Dominican from Salisbury. I compliment you, sir. His sister is one of the leading women at Goldman Sachs, one of the biggest investment houses in the world. As far as Irving is concerned, you know, he never toots his own horn, so I'll toot his horn for him. Maybe he's the highest ranking person of color in the Canadian judiciary, spending his time writing our history for others to come and now try to make it as if we have any interest in being, you know, what you call cheap populist, that we say things only because it is convenient, because if we will get votes. We're not looking for votes, or we'll get maybe applause. We're not looking for applause. We're here to tell the truth, and we're here to speak truth to power. Oftentimes, that truth may be unpalatable. Oftentimes, that truth may not be acceptable. Oftentimes, it takes strength to stand up and to speak to friends, people who you dearly love, and tell them that what you're doing is wrong. Our parents taught us you cannot be wrong and strong. And today we are wrong. In the leadership we've allowed that now has one of its ambassadors being targeted as the person who funded the attack on the US embassy in Benghazi, Libya. What say you, Tony Astafan? What say you, Hubert Charles? What say you, Rupert Sorrento? What say you, Roosevelt Skerritt? What say you, Kyrie and DBS Radio about this news? How does it look for us in the world? We warned you. We warned all of you. We warned our government of its misconduct, and we knew that sooner or later, because of the trend that we were seeing in dishonesty, the trend that we were seeing in lack of humility, the trend that we were seeing in failing to abide by simple issues of procurement. Let me just talk to you for a moment, my people. In 2017, Irving, Andrew, and I were at the Catwheel restaurant, and a young lady who went to school with me, Jacqueline Jupini, got a binder. The binder was full of papers from the 1820s, very brittle. They were yellowed and very fragile. On the cover of the Dominica Chronicle or the Dominica Guardian, one of those papers, Irving, you may have to help me out. My memory sometimes eludes me. 1824, there was a tender, and I want to quote what I recall of that tender. Alvin, I want to recall what that tender said, Lambi. I want to recall what that said, Dion and Irving and Sheridan. It said, and I quote, "The general public is advised that all bakers in Roseau are notified of this tender for the supply of bread to the garrison at Monbruce Barracks, Roseau, Dominica. All responsive tenders shall be provided to the office of the Provost Marshal somewhere at Governor's House or something like that." This is in 1824, Alvin Thomas. Irving Andre, for bread. What they call that? Like pay. That's what the bread they were putting out a tender for bakers to provide bread to Monbruce Barracks, Today, we say we're an independent country. We're a lawless, rascal nation because of how low we've been brought. When you're having a $1 billion airport, where was the tender, Sheridan? Did you see the tender for that airport? Was it on the Chronicle or the Star? Is the Star still around, Irving? I'm not sure whether the Star. Is it the Sun? Is that one they call the Sun? Is the Sun around?
The sun is shining. Here comes the sun, but the sky is gone.
Maybe you might see it on my board. Check my board.
Well, you know, we sometimes have to laugh or smile because if not, we'll have to cry. $1 billion, the biggest project in Dominican history. Some fly-by-night gangster. That's whose hands it's in. Have they told us where the what you call that, the money from the consolidated fund, have they told us where that money is? The money that's missing? No tender. So in the meantime, our architects who went to university, or engineers who went to university, or contractors who we know can build, homes and bridges, are sitting down on the side of the road, their mouths are white. I can still manage a little patois and so on. The reality is there is value in lawfulness. There's value in rule of law. There's value in integrity in governance. And so if we are to be truly independent as a nation, we have to revamp the whole character of our nation, because the character of Dominica has been eviscerated by this regime. And that is why they're always in consort with people who are thieves, people who fund terrorism, and people who have given us a black eye on the international arena. I will close by saying, Pakistan is a former British colony. The Prime Minister, I believe, of Pakistan is the only Pakistani cricketer whose name I remember. His name is Imran Khan. So when I heard that the leader of one Commonwealth country was going to another Commonwealth country, and his close friend Emmanuel Nanton was very high in the world of West Indian cricket, I thought, well, we'll maybe see some pictures of Prime Minister Sheridan, who, by the way, was supposed to be in Dubai. I don't know how Dubai and Pakistan got mixed up. The plane must have missed a stop. But he ended up in Islamabad. Sheridan, did he announce to the country he was going to Islamabad? Are you aware of any announcement made by the press secretary?
Somebody told me he told Irving, but Irving didn't tell us.
Oh, I see. But he is in Islamabad, and I've seen no meeting with the Pakistani president. Or maybe they kept that from us. No meeting with Imran Khan, or maybe they kept that from us. No meeting with the political apparatus that runs the country, which, of course, as a head of state, you go into another foreign country, you have meetings with the government. You may meet with private sector people, that's understandable. But I was reliably informed that he went to cut the ribbon on a private law firm specializing in immigration. And he signed a contract for the relocation of a school, or for the bringing to Dominica of a school of medical sciences. When some cursory investigation was done by diligent Dominicans, by dutiful Dominicans, it was discovered that the school's certification had been pulled. Are we serious, Dominica? Are we serious? I will stop right there for now, because I want to make sure that we can hear from Alvin and talk about how important trade unionism is to a democratic state and democracy at this time. Thank you very much.
Yes, I want to go to Alvin. Thanks, Gabriel, for that. I want to go to Alvin, but before I go to Alvin, I noticed that Irving over there was raring to say something. Just because I said they told him about the thing and he didn't tell us. Irving, I think, wants to say a couple of things. Irving, you want to say something briefly before I go to Alvin?
Well, I wasn't told where the final destination of these folks are, but that is precisely the point, that there's no transparency there. It is not by coincidence that those destinations are all destinations with troubled political systems, destinations which are rife with corruption. Nigeria is not known as a place where miracles happen. Nigeria is known as a place where state monies go missing, for God's sakes. Nigeria is a place where hundreds of thousands of retired civil servants, their names disappear from the pension list. And government, certain well-connected, well-appointed government retirees receive 4 or 5 different pensions. Are you telling me this is where you are going to get investment? So there's no transparency there. Why are we talking about investment? This is a scam. We know it. Huh? We know it. All those. Louis Robinson has repeatedly reminded Dominicans that on a visit to the States, our Prime Minister says, s'il vous plaît, if law enforcement are after you, that's what come to Dominica. We have every crab hole in Dominica you can find to hide yourself. That is an indictment on the policy of selling passports to anyone who will purchase them. That's what happened.
Yes, thanks for that, Irving. I'm sure we'll come back to you later on, but just before I go over to Alvin, I just want to recognize and acknowledge all the people on Facebook here with us tonight. There's so many people who are there already. This crowd is building up very rapidly. And I wanted to just shout out to Didi Easter and Michael Lawrence and Maslin Edwards. I'm not going to have time to read message, but I just want to acknowledge you because you're with us and we're happy that you're with us tonight. And Owen Prosper and Celia Gordon and Elizabeth Douglas and Mali Austri, Veronica Pascal, Lucille Royer, Zaline Peer. So I will talk all of more of the names a little later on as we go, and I'll try to read 1 or 2 messages if it's possible. And we will take your calls a little bit later. Those of you who are listening who want to join us on the telephone later on. But Alvin, I wanted to go to you because, I mean, there's so many things which have been mentioned. You were there from the 70s. You saw what happened there. You've been looking at the Caribbean. You've been a union man. You've seen governments come and you've seen governments go. You've seen personalities of leaders and you listen to the questions that about likability. Dion George expounded on that and gave us a different perspective on the whole question of leadership and likability. Dr. Andre spoke about it, and so did Brother Gabriel. But there's so many things that came up in the course of all of that. Likability versus what? Is likability automatically translating into some kind of level of competence or management or results or or transparency or accountability? Or is likability landing us into certain kinds of problems that we see now, passports all over the place, sometimes in the hands of criminals and vagabonds? What is this likability issue? How important is that? And does money sort of thrash likability when it comes to elections? There were some people who were very likable in some elections. They were supposed to have got voted in very easily, but for some reason or the other, money seemed to have come in, and then all of a sudden they lost their seats. So this whole question, let's look at some of that and see where we are, and in terms of the political education of our people, into what we do and what we want to have in there in terms of representation. You heard Gabriel, you heard Dr. Andre. I mean, where is likability landing us? You understand? So let me go over to you, Alvin.
All right. Thank you, Mr. G. Thank you again for inviting me on this panel. And I just want to add my own voice to say welcome as well to my colleagues and friends, Irving, Gabriel, Dion, and Lambi in the console. Lambi, happy birthday again. I spoke to Ted a couple days ago. Ted was on the 16th. So, Ted and Lambi go way back. That's a strong bond there. So, incidentally, I'll be going down to St. Croix at the end of the month. So I'll be seeing Ted. But yes, I want to join, as I said, in welcoming you and, of course, all listeners to Q and those on Facebook. It's always a pleasure. I consider it a privilege and an honor that you can invite me into your space to share a little of what I have learned. And as a JCI member and a JCI senator, I always like to implode my JCI creed. And there's one tenet in that creed that speaks directly to service to humanity is the best work of life. And I think we all, while we're on this planet Earth, need to, in some shape or form, do or ask ourselves, to what extent do we extend that hand and contribute to the well-being of humanity? Having said that, as it relates to this whole question of likability and all that, honestly, Mr. J, I wouldn't even want to use the time that I have at my disposal to say much on that. I think Irving has really expounded on that quite adequately, so as Dion and Gabriel. All I will say is that we have seen where dimples and good looks are brothers. So, I mean, the proof of the pudding is there. We don't have to go far to look at it. And on the contrast, if we're talking likability, as most people used to say, Mama was an iron lady and I was a very rough person and whatever. She had a very, what I would say, in comparison to what we have, a successful 15 years in office, where this country saw developments and a number of things. We also had a 5-year, 4-year stint, almost 5 years on the UWP with Edison James. So I'm not even going down that road of likability. I know Gabriel sort of alluded to it in his presentation and made reference to the fact that we are, in a few days, we'll be celebrating our 43rd anniversary of independence. And 2 weeks from today, we will be observing 43 years as a young nation. And we can't dismiss that. It's a fact. And the question remains, where do we go? What do we do as a young nation? We'll be 43 years old as an independent nation to pave our way, to track whatever it is for developments, to make this piece of rock they call Dominica a better place for those of us who reside there and those of us who are outside of Dominica one day might want to go home. So it's something that we seriously have to examine. And my hope is always, whenever we have the opportunity like we're having tonight, to exchange with the Dominican people and friends of Dominica, is to what extent what we see will resonate with the people that matters to bring about change. At the end of the day, that is the bottom line, to bring about change. We can say as much as we want, but if our saying does not translate into some doing and bring about change, then I guess we don't have to give up, but I guess we just have to continue rigorously and keep prouding and prouding and prouding. In preparation for tonight's dialogue with my fellow Dominicans and friends of Dominica, I want to reference a couple of things. There's a book that I'm reading on tyranny. And it's a book by an editor, Timothy Snyder. And Timothy is a professor of history at Yale University. And it says there are 20 lessons from the 20th century, and it talks of tyranny. Very interesting book. Few pages, could read it in one day. And now let me just make reference a few quotes from that. He says there that history does not repeat, but it does instruct. History does not repeat, but it does instruct. History can familiarize and it can warn. So when we make reference to history, and I guess all of what Irving have said, what warning are we to learn? And what instructions can we take from that? He goes on and there are various subheadings. He says, take responsibility for the face of the world. Life is political, not because the world cares about how you feel, but because the world reacts to what you do. Question of change. What you do, not how you feel, not how likable you are, but what you do. In politics of the everyday, our words, our gestures, or their absence count very much. In the politics of the everyday, our words, our gestures, or our absence count very much. And I know my good friend Gabriel made reference to truth. And there's also something on the truth. Believe in truth. Because when we speak of all the populist leaders and the trends that we see now, one of the one common thread we see is the fabrication of facts and truth, which ties in with corruption. So he says there, to abandon facts is to abandon freedom. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom. Be courageous as you can. Be courageous as you can. There's a book issued by Lennox Honeychurch, In the Forest of Freedom, The Fighting Maroons of Dominica. Be courageous as you can. If none of us are prepared to die for freedom, then all of us will die under tyranny. What is the legacy of Bala, Jaco, Cicero? You name these guys who were prepared to die for freedom because they did not want to die under tyranny. Again, if I go back to the very first quote that I quoted, history does not repeat, but it instructs. History can familiarize and it can warn. I'm saying so to say, Mr. G, that as Gabriel indicated, all of us here at some point was involved in some level of activism. We were there. We had the courage and the fortitude to stand up, to speak truth, to recognize that, you know, if we don't do something, we not only have to say something, but we got to do something. And it is my hope, therefore, that our young people who are listening tonight, our young people, you know, at least within the age of 18, 15, in my JC's organization, the focus is on young persons between the age of 18 and 40. This is where we focus. That's where I got some of my induction and my training that helped me in life. How do we, what legacy are we going to leave? That's important. Those of us now who in that great AARP grouping, I'm not in it yet, but you know, I'm getting there, Sheridan. What legacy are we going to leave? You know? So I am premising all of that within the context of where we are today and as we move into our 45th year of independence. 7 shy years from today, 7 shy years from now, we'll be doing 50 years of independence, half a century. Are we positioning ourselves now for the next 7 years? And to say, well, okay, we got a plan. This is our action plan. This is our strategic plan for the next 7 years where we want to get. Let me just quote for you again from another book that I'm reading. Quite interesting. It's a book written by 3 authors and distinct authors on Lee Kuan Yew. He was the premier of Singapore. Lee Kuan Yew. Singapore. The size of Singapore is the size of Dominica.
No. It's smaller. It's smaller than Dominica. It's 265.
I'm trying to be generous, Gabriel. I'm trying to be generous. It's the size of Dominica.
I know.
With a population of 5.6 million. The life expectancy as of 2020 was 83.5 years. I saw something a couple of weeks ago on WhatsApp showing that we had the highest penetration of centenarians, a good 30 or more. I don't know if you guys saw it. So I take it we have a certain level of life expectancy too. Singapore, this guy, the foreword in that book was written by Henry Kissinger. And let me just quote just briefly a few areas for you. By far the smallest country in Southeast Asia, Singapore seemed destined to become a client state of more powerful neighbors. If indeed it could preserve its independence at all, Lee thought otherwise. His vision was a state that would not simply survive, but prevail by excelling. Superior intelligence, discipline, and ingenuity would substitute for resources. He summoned his compatriots to a duty that they had never previously perceived. First, to clean up their city, then to dedicate it to overcome the initial hostility of their neighbors and their own ethnic division by superior performance. As Henry Kissinger writing. Along the way, Lee has made himself an indispensable friend of the United States, not primarily by the powers he represents, but by the excellence of his thinking. His analysis is of such quality and depth that his counterpart consider meeting with him as a way to educate themselves. For 3 generations now, whenever Lee comes to Washington, he meets with an array of people spanning from government, policymakers, businesses, everything. Every American president who has dealt with him has benefited from the fact that on international issues, he has identified the future of his country with the fate of democracies. Furthermore, Lee can tell us about the nature of the world that he faced, with especially penetrating insight into the thinking of his region. That's Henry Kissinger right in the forward there. Let me just share with you a little data, because all of that means nothing unless you in a practical sense, it gets down to the man, the Dominican man. And like one of the former President George Bush had said, are you better off now than you were 20 years ago? So ask yourself that question. Do that introspect. Are you better off now than you were 20 years ago? Each Dominican should ask themselves that question. And if they're better off, then fine. But if they're not better off, then what are you prepared to do about it? That's where the question of doing comes in and not just talking. And that's why sometimes I get a little pissed off myself and I don't call the radio station as often as maybe before, because there is more talk than doing. And we got to get to the point now on the eve of our 43rd anniversary of independence to start acting, to start doing. Singapore, I did a research on Singapore GDP per capita over an extended period, 1960 through 2021. When Singapore, in 1978, when we became independent, Singapore GDP per capita was $3,194 US. $3,194 US GDP per capita. Now we know, folks, for the benefit of my listeners, GDP is like the balance sheet of your country. It determines how you're doing in terms of your production, your services. It's like running a business. So like you have your business, you have your balance sheet and you see, well, you know, how you're doing, your inventory, the business is doing, is not cooling. GDP is a sort of similar for the country. In 1978, I quoted 3,000. In 2020, Singapore GDP is $59,798 US. Singapore ranks 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the list of several countries. And here's some of the countries that Singapore surpasses in GDP. Sweden, Australia, Hong Kong, Germany, Israel, your own country, Canada, United Kingdom, France, Italy. These are some of the countries that Singapore GDP exceeds. Remember I told you what was the size of the country?
United States?
United States. Remember I told you what was the size of the country and the population. Let's come a little closer home. There's also one other country that I can reference, but I won't spend too much time on, is Taiwan. Another small country with high GDP. I think Taiwan GDP in 2020 was something like 58, I believe, thereabout, 59,398. Let's come closer home. Dominica, let's start with Dominica. Dominica GDP 2020 was $6,526 US. That was followed by St. Vincent at $7,297.91. Then was followed by St. Lucia, $9,276.12. And followed by Antigua, $14,450 US. And then Barbados, $15,191.16. That's 2020, we're looking figures. And St. Kitts, which is also on that list that I had Singapore listed, is at $17,435.93. St. Kitts Nevis, Federation of St. Kitts Nevis. Why am I saying all that? I'm saying all that to say, gentlemen, and my listeners, that unless we act and do something, we just spin it up in mud. I mean, St. Kitts is one of the few islands in the region that still have diplomatic relationship with Taiwan. They never gave that up. St. Lucia, I'm not sure what the now just recently elected Labour Party is going to do, but under Chajne, the Taiwanese, they had a relationship with them. Those of us who can recall the superb relationship we had with Taiwan under the Freedom Party government for 15 years. What do we have with China and the Chinese? Selling us, opening two little shops or stores in Roseau and trying to compete with our local entrepreneurs? Give us a hospital and every time it rains, it leaks like a basket? During that 43 years that we're talking about of our independence, we had a Ross University that was with us for 40 out of those 43 years, contributing to the GDP that I just referenced. And we allow Ross to go, and now in Pakistan talking about the university. Ross was associated and accredited with universities like DeVry, a well-established accredited university. Dion can speak more directly to that than I can. So, yes, I can give you the perspective of the history during my times, the 70s, but as I say, that would merely instruct you. That's merely to warn you. I want to dwell more in the present. And my call really tonight is to shout out to all these young people out there in Dominica, all these 18-year-old and 20-year-old and 30 and 40-year-old. I'm not in any way trying to leave out folks like myself and Sheridan, but these are the people who are going like we did, like the Gabriel did, like Irving did, like Dion did, like Lambi did. These are the people that are going to bring about the change and to turn around Dominica so that as we move from 43 years going into 44 and to our 50th anniversary of independence as a nation very shortly, 7 years from today, we can then boast of a GDP like St. Kitts, which is the balance sheet of the country, which shows you how productive you are as a country. What do you produce? And this is my passion. This is where I get very, if one might say, emotional, because I know Sheridan, we have the capacity to do it. We have Dominicans back home who have the capacity to do that. We have Dominicans in the diaspora who are first and foremost Dominican, no matter how many years Gabriel and I and Irving and Dion live outside of Dominica. We are Dominica. And we can do it, guys. We have to have the courage to be like Bala and Cicero and our Maroons who had no internet, who had no WhatsApp, who had no phone to communicate. But they were able to go in the forest and undermine and fight against the resistance and say, we're not going to sit down and take that. We got to do it. And I hope my young people who are listening are ready to do that. They're ready to take on that challenge and to take on. And we have an opportunity and an obligation to leave that legacy with them, to pass over that baton to them. So I will end on that for now, and to say that there are several examples around the world today with good leadership, with good examples that we can emulate against us just trying to peddle our passports, we have no creativity when it comes to thinking. I mean, I just recently, there was a program on the water with Ethnough and on Matt on the program. And there was this big hue and cry about water, blah, 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 blah. We got water bottle from Trinidad, from Jamaica, Antigua, and I guess who knows where, selling in Dominica. But we pride ourselves as the land of water, land of 365 rivers. Do you know now that water is treated as a commodity? Water is now traded as oil on the mercantile side as a commodity. Water is going to be one of the most scarce resources within the next, I would say in the next 10, 15 years. China is facing a serious problem with water. But we're in bed with China and we can, in some shape or form, protect our water, enhance what we have, protect our environment, build our resources, which in turn complement climate change, and badge our water, like they badge oil and take oil to the rest of the world. We can have a tanker. We can have, like, for example, instead of gas station, we can have water stations. We can send the water and have water stations. The rest of the world going to have water stations where they go and they, instead of pumping gas, you pump in water. And we can provide all that water. But we got to have the ingenuity and the creativeness to do that. So, Mr. G, I'll rest for now because you just fired me up now. And I want to just take a pause. So that's my contribution for now.
Well, you have to take that responsibility, because I notice every time you call my name, you put a credential after it. You say AARP, as though I don't know what academic qualification that is. But
American Association for Retired Persons.
Come on, people. That's not what it means.
But here's what I think. We'll Lambi, anytime you start getting calls and you want to just give us a sign, and we'll come over to you, right? So but I want to go over to Gabriel. But Gabriel, as I go over to you, because I see you want to do something here, and then I go to Andre. But I mean, Alvin made a clear case. You see, leadership matters. The quality of leadership matters. You know, I don't know whether this likability issue is any kind of big deal, but it seems to me what he was mentioning and talking about in Singapore, it matters. I mean, a small island like us, 5 million people or whatever they have, look at the GDP. Why can't Alvin ask the question, are we better off now than we were 20 years ago? Why can't we be remotely close to what is going on? I mean, not necessarily even with Singapore, but why are we where we are today? So, Gabriel, let me take you briefly before I go to Irving.
I want to commend my brother Alvin. Alvin, that was one of the most splendid, most eloquent, erudite, profound presentations I've heard in a long time. And it moved me because I read everything I can on Lee Kuan Yew. And herein, behold, I share with you a mystery. Roosevelt Skerritt was not someone we always criticized. We supported Roosevelt Skerritt. So it's about 2004. He's just come in. Pierre Chas has died. I come to Dominica with my family. I bring a gift for Roosevelt Skerritt. You know what that gift was? Singapore from third world to first world in 25 years. And that's the book I thought you were going to show. I gave that book to Roosevelt Skerritt.
I have that
At the
one.
financial,
I have that one.
you should, and every Dominican should try to get one.
Oh yeah, fantastic.
Because that book, Alvin, shows you what leadership means. Here's a man who would not fly in his own presidential plane. He would take regular commercial to save the country money. Who would go on trips. And when he's on the trip, he's looking in the country for all fragrant and fruity trees. This is a lawyer. This is not an agronomist. This is not an economist. This is not an engineer. But that is what he's doing. And he's bringing those trees back to Singapore so he can beautify his country and make it more productive. He was thrifty. The first family he had investigated for corruption was his own. He started on the principle of, I shall go first and submit myself to the law. Who said no law, no constitution can stop me from doing what I was doing? Was that Lee Kuan Yew? Lee Kuan Yew submitted himself to the law. His country is 265 square miles. They have not one single river.
Right. The resources.
They have focused on their human resource, capital, ingenuity. Dominica's tragedy is that we have all kinds of scientists. Gregoire Lewis, Clifton Dupini Technical College, has made parts for the space shuttle. Lyndon Scotland, University of Dayton, has made fuel for the space shuttle. Owen Raphael was the general manager in North America for Hyundai Corporation's luxury brand Genesis. That's the younger brother of Sam Raphael. Chemist, mathematician, Shah Grell, all A's, Morgan State University in chemistry, full ride scholarship to MIT, the daughter of Oliver Grell, formerly of the Harlem Bombers. On and on and on, you see there are multitudes of Dominicans, inside and outside Dominica, with competence, and we have no place. Black people and Carib people, the shame of this government, have no place in Dominica today. And I'll say it loud. It's a racist government. It's a colonialist government. It's a puppet regime. It's a gangster regime. If you're Black in Dominica today, and if you're Carib in Dominica today, you're pimped, okay? You are discriminated against in favor of folks in the Middle East. That's where he goes to Dubai. That's where his friends are. Dominicans are discriminated against by this government. It's a shame to call itself a Labour Party. They are a disgrace to the legacy of Bala and Jacqueline Congaree. And they better not talk about independence. They go there to Dubai talking about Nature Island. Nature Island, my foot. They are destroying our rivers. Every moment there's rain in Dominica, we have floods. Why? Because they've done nothing for a reforestation campaign to hold the Quemte, that is the topsoil. So every time there's some rain in Dominica, what happens? We have flooding like it's going out of style because they're not concerned. You know, it's not enough to say something about love. You have to make it manifest in what you do, not what you say. And what Alvin has done is Alvin put his hand on a country and its leader that should be an example to all of us. Modest guy, humble guy, okay? And he put forth his best effort for his country. And I gave that book and I said, Prime Minister Skerritt, please read that book.
The other one.
I never heard anything from him. Thank you very much. That's the book. I never heard anything from him again. And I just want to say, and I'll close with a memory of Rosie Douglas. When I met Rosie Douglas in 1976, the first thing he gave me was a book called Common Sense by Thomas Paine.
Yeah,
He believed in
that's
education.
another great book.
He believed in education. Thomas Paine was an American revolutionary who promoted the idea of American independence. And so that's what he gave me. And so we believe in education. We believe in integrity. We believe in good governance. We don't want any Haitianization of Dominica, but that's where we're heading right now. We're seeing the fall of our republic because it's been captured by a coterie, a cabal of men and women who are not dutiful to Dominica in the way they rule Dominica and who are always associated with people involved in gangsterism. And that is the result that we see. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gabriel, for that. I have to go over to Irving Andrew, but Lambi, if you have any calls now, you might want to take a few. because I know that we'll spend some time with Irving Andrew when we go over to him. Let's take a couple of calls. Maslami, let us hear you on the calls.
There was a caller on there let's see if the caller is still there. Caller is still there? I think the caller's gone.
Well, give the numbers out, Lambi. Give the numbers out, and maybe we can just give them a minute to give them the numbers, and then we'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, the numbers are 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, and 305-432-9624. You may continue, Mr. G.
All right. So I need to go over to Dr. Irving Andre. We're back on this whole question of leadership, and you can see the example, Irving, that has been put on the table here now, Singapore. I mean, we've been talking about Singapore for the longest while as a beacon, that shining house on the hill up there. This is where we should start to emulate. Why aren't we going there? I mean, as Gabriel said, we went to Pakistan. Who did we meet there? What did we do there? Why aren't we going there? Why aren't we looking to do what they're doing? Why are we trying to emulate other people, and we're not emulating people like what's happening in Singapore? There's a model.
True.
Irving, you want to tell us a few things about some of that? Your mic. You have to unmute your mic.
Leadership, in many respects, it's not just something which is nurtured, a quality. It is something which is inherent in any particular person. The fact of the matter is, certain persons have qualities that predispose them to being good leaders. Let me say this, that at certain critical junctures, historical moments, certain qualities take precedence over others. What do I mean? For example, during World War II in England, Winston Churchill was regarded as the epitome of good leadership. It was not a matter of likability. It's a matter of strength, a matter of resolve, a matter of determination. Someone who embodied the fight, the inner strength of a nation to defeat the forces of evil. Immediately after the Second World War, they turfed him. Other qualities became paramount. And so it is when we assess the whole question of leadership. At certain critical junctures, the persons who become leaders, they possess or they should possess certain qualities that embody the hopes and aspirations of the people. They embody those qualities which are patently lacking in the body politic. And that is what we have to ask ourselves. What qualities, as we speak, are lacking in the body politic? We talk about the general condition of Dominicans today. We talk about the inability to give Dominicans a stimulus package during these most perilous of times. But at the same time, we have money lavishly spending on accommodation, on commissions, on bribery, on treating, on contracts for which there are no tenders. Inordinate and obscene sums of money being spent. So what qualities are lacking at this particular juncture? Good stewards, good shepherds. We need a Nazarene as a leader. One who will not sacrifice the public good to fatten his or her purse. One who is conscientious. Somebody who's empathetic to suffering. Someone who will reach out to the lepers of today and offer them a helping hand. Someone who will not seek for them to wear any colors of patriotism or loyalty before they can qualify for assistance. Someone who has the well-being of the nation as his or her ultimate goal. We need someone like Mohan, what's his name again? Manmohan Singh in India. the scholar king. We need someone by the name of Nelson who can step down at the very apex of his power, content that he has served his nation, content that he saved his nation from internecine violence, death, and destruction, from having to the majority, save the nation from the wrath of the majority, seeking or wreaking revenge against the minority white population. You need someone like, quite frankly, Edward Oliver LeBlanc. Someone who can say, Gasson, I've finished with that. Gasson, it's time for me to retire at 02. Gasson, there is inherent worth and value in fishing, in enjoying the pleasures of exile, political exile. Someone who can leave without fattening his wallet. And there's other Dominican leaders who showed that, in a sense. Patrick John, for example, Edison James. The state was not the avenue to fill your back pocket. We need a leader perhaps like Angela Merkel. She still lives in an apartment after 16 years at the helm of the German state. A clinical disinterest in aggrandizement, self-aggrandizement. That is the type of leader that we need. The question is, where is that leader? The question is, are we supporting that leader who can take us out of what is now the reality in Dominica? Why can't we do that? Is there a curse on us as racialized individuals, descendants of slaves? Are we like that poor wretch in the myth of Sisyphus, doomed to carry a stone of corruption on our backs, and as soon as we reach the top of a hill, for it to come rushing back down? But do not despair, because sometimes in the darkest of moments, the fruit of redemption is being sown. So we have to look at it from that perspective. Redemption Song by Bob Marley will resonate throughout the land. The crops will start bearing fruit. The soil will be watered with productivity and with righteousness and integrity. And inevitably, those who have caused so much harm to the state will face their own judgment. Whatever happened to someone called Noriega? The same Noriega who was knocking a cutlass on a podium, daring the United States, come and touch me if you can. What happened to this fellow from Iraq? What's his name? Saddam? Was that his name? I can't remember. What the hell did I know anyway? What happened to the Shah of Iran? They all thought themselves invincible. What happened to Julius Caesar? What happened to Macbeth? Macbeth believed that no man or woman born could overturn him. You see, some leaders, so consumed by their power, they develop an aura of invincibility. But you know one thing that they haven't been able to guard against? Themselves. They haven't been able to guard against themselves. The avarice and the greed and the selfishness and the narcissism overpowers them inevitably, and they become the author of their own demise. That is a lesson we've learned from history. And that is why we have to take courage. That is why we have to be imbued by the biblical sense of optimism that we see in so many parables, where there's the prodigal son who wasted all his wealth and had to come back humbled and be welcomed with a feast. Where there's that little boy with a slingshot in his back pocket facing that giant with a big club of iniquity. I can't remember what happened, but we have to embrace the optimism, as I said, inherent in the biblical message. And we have to be motivated and animated by the biblical admonition that one, I will help those who will help themselves. And secondly, that other admonition that we grew up with, by the sweat of your brow, thou shalt eat bread. Thank you.
So thank you, Andre. And then, of course, Lambi, I don't know whether you want to take a couple of calls now before I go on to Dr. George.
Yes, I want to do that because there's someone waiting on the line. Hope he's still there.
Good,
The caller on the line, please go ahead. Nope, that one has moved on. Let's take this one. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please. We're not hearing anything either, so I think you should move on.
Yeah, so Dr. Andre, you have somebody there, Lambi? I hear the voice.
Caller, are you still there?
Yeah, I'm there. Maybe your system is muted.
Go ahead. Just go ahead with your call.
Right ahead, we're hearing you.
Okay, you hear me. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be listening to the program, really. You know, and it's very important, very, very, very important, because you see, I'll tell you, for the number of years that this administration is in office, and you know, at the beginning of the tenure, many Dominicans said, "Let us give the young man a chance, because he might have some brilliant ideas to build up this country." Okay? And even from that point, when he came into office, there were many Dominicans who were very skeptical about his manner of administration, simply because of, you know, the way that he treated Pierre Charles in particular. All right? Dominicans are very, very skeptical about it. But he knew exactly why he wanted power. And a lot of us knew exactly why he wanted power. Because he wanted to be in charge and to administer Dominica in his own way, how he wanted, for his personal gain. For his personal gain and personal interest. And from the time we saw exactly how he treated particularly Pierre Charles, I was not a member of the Labour Party. I used to be. All right? But from the time I saw how he handled Pierre Charles, Pierrot, our Pierrot, humble man, it acted on my nerves. And the saddest part about it, you know, is that we have some Dominicans who call themselves gentlemen and ladies, supporting what Prime Minister Kerrit is doing to Dominica and Dominicans for his own personal and selfish gains. This man don't worry about what people say about, you know, he don't worry. I can just see him sitting there with maybe a drink of whiskey or wine, with his legs crossed, and maybe even smiling at the program that's going on now, and saying, "Zosa Palace is lovely." That is the type of person he is, you know. That is the type of person he is.
Caller, could we move on, please?
Yes, okay. But the time must come. The time must come when Dominicans, we have to do something about it. If we do not do something about it quickly, because you see, he humbles himself when election time is coming. He's like a baby. And when he wins, then he changes back into his original style.
Thank you very much, caller. We've got many calls coming in there. We have to take this other call. Good evening, caller. Go ahead, please, with your call.
Good evening, Rambi. Good evening to the panelists and to the listenership.
Yes, good evening.
Can you hear me okay?
We're hearing you okay. Go ahead, please.
Okay, gentlemen. At this time of independence, I think that one of the things that we need to do is reflect upon the reason why a country would seek its independence. The countries normally would seek their independence in order for them to be able to decide their own affairs and no longer have the colonialist powers decide for them. one of the pillars of that decision-making process is that of deciding who should represent you in your parliament. We have a government now that seems to spend a lot of time every year celebrating our independence in Dubai. But how ironic it is that that very government, which is celebrating our independence, seems to deprive us every 5 years of the pillar of the decision making as to who should represent us in our parliament. And I just want us to reflect upon that, the fact that we celebrate our independence, we pretend to be independent, but one of the key areas in which we actually exercise our rights and our freedoms in making the decision as to who leads us is deprived us by this very government. Let's reflect on that this year for independence, folks. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right, thanks a lot for that. Lambi, you want to take any more calls?
On the overseas line, go ahead, please.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
All righty. Listen, I've been listening with great interest to your discussion this evening, and certainly very intellectually stimulating and all of that. But I'd like to maybe go back to the likability factor, if I may, if you would permit me to do that, because I think that's a very important discussion. I know, of course, my friend Gabriel is listening. Gabriel is my personal attorney. We're very good friends. But I think we're overlooking an element that is crucially important, as it relates to electability. If a person is likable, sometimes you can buy from them something that you don't even need. If they're not likable, you won't buy from them even if you need what they're selling. And I don't think it should be overlooked. Now, yes, we may say that it shouldn't matter. That's in a perfect world. But in the world that we live in, likability, my friend, matters. It matters in the United States. Trump won Hillary because he was more likable than her. And I think let's remove the personalities. Let's forget who the prime minister is. Let's forget who the leader of the opposition might be. If you have one person who is likable and you have another that is not likable, that person who is not likable, chances are they're going to lose. And so what the opposition in that particular situation, remember we're removing the personalities because we're not in this to talk about individuals. Whoever the unlikable person is, wouldn't it be to the advantage of that party to look for someone, yes, who has values, but who is also likable? I think that we are backing up the wrong tree. The argument should not be that, well, we need to choose someone who is just character-based and someone who's values-based, whether or not they are likable. No man is an island. No leader is an island. So why not think in terms of finding a likable person who has values? And remember, I'm not attaching this to any person or personalities, because for me, that's not what it's all about. It's about the principle here. Even the Bible, and I'm a theologian, even the Bible tells you man looks on the outward appearance, my friend. It cannot be denied. And anybody who makes an argument and say, well, it does not matter, they don't know what they're saying. You can say it shouldn't matter, but to say it does not matter is wrong, because it does matter. It matters in every nation on the planet. The guy that you talked about in Singapore, he is likable. He is likable. And that's why they do polls to find out how likable the people are who are going up against each other.
Thank you, caller. We're going to move on.
Okay, good.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I want to just say, yes, we appreciate the contribution of the caller. Dr. Irving Andre, I wanted to go over to you to, because we didn't really talk too much about the whole likability issue. Maybe you might want to comment on that as the caller mentioned it.
Well, we appreciate the contribution of the caller. I know him very well from Portsmouth. He's done very well, so I commend him. But I reject the premise of his position. He's assuming that likability will ensure success at the polls. Anyone who knows anything about what has happened during the elections, the last 3 or 4 elections, will know that success at the polls has precious little to do with likability. It has everything to do with corrupting the laws of Dominica. So we can quote Bible and verse. That is not the issue. The opposition is not someone who disliked. He may be demonized by certain political entities, but he's liked. But to suggest that somehow failure to succeed is because of his general unlikability, I say so with the greatest of respect to the good pastor who's quite qualified in his field, that quite frankly, what he says has nothing to do with reality. That is the bottom line. You can be as likable. Jesus Christ was very likable last time I checked. You know, very likable. And who sold him out? Who betrayed him? Huh? Who? Who among us will cast the first stone? The issue we face here has nothing to do with likability. It has everything to do with honesty. It has everything to do with integrity. It has everything to do with dignity. It has everything to do with the respect for law and order. It has everything to do with governing in accordance with the strictures of the Constitution. Honesty is what we need, not likability, my friend. That's the bottom line.
Yeah, so Alvin, I know you want to say something on this, but
Well, I know Irving. I mean, as I told you, Irving and I have a connection. So I guess we talk to each other and we pick each other's brain. But Irving is right on target. And that is why when I started with my earlier intervention, I said, look, I make some passing comment on that, but I'm not going down that road because Irving is absolutely correct. Because the last several elections that we had in Dominica, let's look at it. Take away all that plane loads of people that came in. Take away all that CO and all that millions of dollars that was spent on one side. And let's go on an even playing field. Let's take it Dominica, local. People in Dominica who have been in Dominica, who see the guaye, who see the good time, whatever it is, and to vote. There's absolutely no way this current Labour Party government would have won on likability or any of that sort, on an even playing field. So it has all up to do corruption, finance, campaign financing, bribe, treating. That's what it has to do. I had a grandmother, as I told you guys before, and you know, you get a lot from these old folks. You know, my grandmother died at 111 years old. 111 years old. She died on the year of Hurricane Maria. She had no bachelors, no masters, no doctorates, nothing like that. But this woman had what you call common sense. Gabriel mentioned the book earlier by Pim. She had what you call it. She used to tell me, Alvin, l'esprit bat addiction ou passacione muerte guai. And there's an old saying that goes, bel vijay, mauvais caractère. So this question of likability, I wouldn't say there may be 1%, 2%. I didn't want to go down that road. But clearly, it has to do with honesty, integrity. Take, for instance, the IPO was dismantled. No law, no this. We don't even know now when he came in how much assets he acquired and how much he has now. The IPO dismantled. What are you telling me about likability? So I respect the caller. We all have our point of view. So I just would share wholeheartedly with Irving. I know I may come back a little later on, but just before I forget, let me shout out to a group of young men called Moon Sewie in Dominica. I'm sure we're all familiar with them. Because earlier we talked about courage. We talked about the Maroons. The Munsewe young men. Let's not shoot the messenger, but listen to the message. And I really want to commend these young men. And that is the kind of courage we want, not anything to do with likability. We want more Munsewe to hit the streets of Roseau and to demand change and to bring change about. Not a question of going find who have Bell Vision, who have dimples. No, that's out of the question.
Right, so Dr. Dion George, the man from the people of Salisbury, you know what they went through? Likability. They were being shot at and they were being tear gas in the middle of the night while they were sleeping. Likability. Now, here it is. Irving mentioned a few things earlier on. He said no stimulus package, but we spend lavishly on CEO, on treating, on bribery, on untendered contracts. Likability. What are we talking about? Likability, or are we talking about? Are we really talking? We want to talk about leadership, right? And what does it translate into? Now, leaders, really great leaders, people like Edward Liebler and Nelson Mandela, they step down in the prime, in the height of their power, right? To show they really, the power is not what defines them. They're there to serve, right? You mentioned the question of service, and you put it in biblical terms when you made your opening remarks. Irving mentioned something like leaders who do not fill their back pockets. He mentioned Edward Liebler and Patrick John, they left office. Edward Liebler said he left office with $56 in his account or something like that. And Irving said, but however, that all of that notwithstanding, sometimes in the darkest of nights, the fruit of redemption is sown. And we might reap the harvest. Is there a new paradigm shift around the corner? Leaders who develop this aura of invincibility, no law, no constitution, they can be the whole thing can become the demise, their own demise, really, because I mean, when you excess too much, that can you maybe sow in the seeds of your own demise. Are we seeing those seeds now? Are we seeing the fruits of those seeds now? Excessing. And somebody asked the question about electability, but then what struck me the most is what I think Alvin said it. He said something what his grandmother said, yes, common sense beats all this intellectual stuff. But I mean, he also said something which was very, very instructive. He said, Bel Vijay, move character. What is this thing that we talked about in the election? We talked about people are nice looking and all kind of thing. What does that mean? I mean, what does that translate into? Somebody mentioned earlier on, are we better off today than we were 20 years ago? Somebody else mentioned, I think it's Alvin, the comparative GDP of Singapore in whatever year, and in 2020, look at where it is today and what is ours compared to our people around the region, the other countries. It's as if we're not just marking time. It looks like we're reversing while everybody else is advancing. So what are we talking about when we talk about leadership and likability? Let's translate that into results. So I want to go over to you, Dion, because you started off with us on that. Let's go a little bit more on that.
Right. Well, a couple of things I think is worth mentioning. Again, I think a good way to approach that is not in a parochial, way, because there are two sides to a story, and I don't want to be dismissive of any of those views. I will say that with credit to the last caller, when he made reference to Hillary and Clinton, he's correct that Donald Trump had a higher likability than Hillary Clinton. And one can argue that perhaps led to winning the election. Some people perceived her as being unworthy names to be called on this program. But the issue here is see what it led to. If one recalls January 6th in the Capitol. And so I think if one speaks about effective leadership, undoubtedly, likability would not be one variable or one factor that should be the leading variable as to whether or not that makes a good leader. on that, I think a follow-up argument would be one would consider having a educated citizenry that goes beyond the surface of the face, or beyond the surface of someone's appearance of friendliness, right? And so that's where we come in as educators, as the media, as the watchdog, that the issue of likability does not become paramount in deciding who becomes a leader. And that's my perspective, without being dismissive, but also recognizing that there is a point, because he do have a point. In fact, there are certain universities now who are hiring political scientists to carry polls to see who is more likable. So, but indeed, in terms of our context in Dominica, we are aware that based on our local politics, that was not a leading factor in deciding who won the election. And on that point, it takes me to, again, this holistic view as to what we need in Dominica. What we need, my dear friends, is a more institutionalized way of governance. We need term of office, a set term for the prime minister, the president, etc. We need electoral reform. We need to clean up the voters' ID. We need to, of course, have IDs. We, of course, need campaign finance reform to the point where persons are accountable, that there is an overtness, an openness as to where the monies are coming into a campaign, right? And so we need accountability where these campaign finances can be so extravagant with no ending, like someone mentioned, a series of planes coming to the airport during election. I mean, that's not what we're talking about, right? That's not what we want. And so I would like to take a bivocal view of this likability issue. It is an issue. Nobody's saying it is not. But in terms of our context in Dominica, it is not a factor that should decide who is a successful leader. Because clearly, maybe Donald Trump had this flair about him. Even in my classes today, students come in and on their student bag has Trump supporter. He still has this Trumpism going on. But as you can see what it led to, right? So that's just one point. The other thing I would like to say as I relate to something that Dr. Andre mentioned, he mentioned something about what is the concern about some of our leaders in the Caribbean. And I thought of some adjectives that could describe some of them. I think some of them are arrogant. I think some of them are boastful. I think some of them are unforgiving. I think some of them are insecure. I think some of them are unaffectionate. I think some of them are undisciplined in spending and in the way they carry out business. And so what do we need? We need people who are good planners. We need people who are good listeners. We need people who are contented. We need people who are productive. We need people who are self-sacrificing. And that brought me to my earlier point in the book of Mark in the gospel, that Jesus Christ said that if you want to be a leader, you have to first be willing to serve. Thank you, Sheridan.
Yes, I want to go back to Irving Andre first before I go to Alvin. I noticed Alvin wants to say something. Irving, you might want to add something.
Just a brief comment on the analogy with in America with why Trump won over Hillary, because Hillary was not likable. But that was within the context of free and fair elections. He won on a level playing field. It had some resonance, but it's not just likability. Hillary had many strikes against her. There's significant sexism in the United States. There are many people who are intimidated by a woman being the president of America. So we can't just reduce this to likability. What we do know in Dominica is what guarantees success at the polls is an unlimited fund hidden somewhere outside, which can fund Gramps Morgan and all these fellas hundreds of thousands of dollars a machinery which direct people to vote strategically in certain constituencies to ensure the success of a candidate. That is what rules the day in Dominica. Likability is a red herring. That's the bottom line. That is why this debate in Dominica, and I agree with Alvin, in Dominica, about likability will get you nowhere, because it assumes falsely that that is the reason why success has not come the way of the opposition. They will spend the whole eternity in the wilderness if this inequality persists. One side having unlimited access to funds, and the other side has virtually none. If you look at the boycott likability, that's what Saki fell. It has no resonance in Dominica as we speak. And that's my contribution.
Yes, Alvin?
Yeah, let me just say briefly, I respectfully submit, Sheridan. I'm pulling up here and I have records of that. The Gallup poll that tracks favorability, which in a way hinges on likability. And Trump and Clinton finish with historically poor image. But here the rating. Hillary Clinton, 52%. Trump, 61% unfavorable. Trump, 61% unfavorable score is worst in presidential polling history. Clinton, 52% unfavorable score is second worst. So I don't think it is entirely accurate. Trump was more unfavorable, less likable. But you know why Trump won? Again, we go back to what I said earlier. To abandon facts is to abandon freedom when we spoke about tyranny. And that is why you had the January 6th that you had in the United States. It's a question of manipulate facts, how you corrupt, how you zero, how you play one against the other, how you malign and degrade your opponent, how you refuse to appear on a stage to debate. You're going up for prime minister, get on the stage with the leader of the opposition and debate the issues. Bribery, that is what that led to it. This question of likability is a red herring. Let's deal with the issues and let's get the courageous people like the Munsewe. We need more Munsewe in Dominica. That's what we need. And I commend these young men that put themselves forward, that goes village to village every weekend, village to village. And you know what they did? They are carrying copies of the Dominica Constitution. They're telling you, educate yourself, learn your rights. That's what we need to do. But this question of likability, let's not get sidetracked and spend time on that. There are more fundamental issues, as I said, on the eve of our 43rd anniversary of independence. Let's talk about how we're going to move this country and get our GDP to at least 10 to at least 3/3 of St. Kitts, and not at that meager 6,526. That is our GDP as of 2020. That's what we need to focus on. And all this nonsense about likability.
Yes, Gabriel? Your mic.
Sorry about that. I want to commend Brother Al, Brother Irving, and Brother Dion for their contributions on this likability issue. But before I even do that, I want to call all members of the Q95 family to join Brother Alvin in his commendation, the Emun Seri group. They're doing what needs to be done. And for any Dominican at home and abroad who can make contact with them to send them 1, 2, 3 books, please do that. We are going to ask Dominicans to read. That's what Moon Seri is doing. They're not selling dope. They're not selling rum, jump up, CO. They're asking people to read the Constitution of Dominica. Dion George is very correct. We have to institutionalize knowledge and processes. I want to commend the pastor who called. He's a very fine man. He's my brother and friend. I love him. And he makes a very good point in that it is true. You were told as a child, never judge a book by its cover. But the reality is people do that. And they do that to their disadvantage, and they do that to their folly. We need to dig deeper than the dimples. It took me a lot to say that this is the most racist government in the modern history of Dominica. Why do I say that? Dominicans are very fond of pretending that we do not have prejudice. But this government has fomented prejudice against the Marigot people. I have heard Labour Party people calling Linton black and ugly, with a big nose and thick lips. That is the Labour government that we have today. They promote prejudice against Marigot people. And I've never said it before, but I got to say it now. This is a racist government. Roosevelt's character is a racist, white supremacist, prejudice, misleader of our nation. Take that. That's what he is. And he has perverted the character of our people with a smile. He's promoted racial prejudice and color prejudice in Dominica. He's put our country in the hands of foreigners who hate Dominicans, who disrespect Dominicans. He consistently disrespects Dominica by the people he's put over us. Why is it that Dominicans are not prospering in Dominica and foreigners are? He's a racist. He's a prejudiced person. He's fomented hatred against people of Marigot. He has not corrected his supporters when they called people who are opposition cockroach. He's not corrected them when they use terms like black and ugly and big nose and big lips. Let's be blunt. I'm not here to come and run for votes and popularity. He's perverted the character of the nation, you see, with a smile. And of course, a big bank account. Nations get the governments they deserve, you see. The Haitian people used to pray to Papa Doc, or Papa Doc who resides in heaven. Hallowed be thy name. When Papa Doc died, they gave their allegiance to Baby Doc. Where is Haiti today? In the United States, you have people who support Donald Trump, who say that if you put a mask on, you're going to deny your brain oxygen flow. That if you take vaccine, it's part of a plot to put a chip into your brain. They believe all kinds of things because he has been able to, with his prejudice and his appeal to racialism, corral a great number of the American people on his side. Likewise, Mussolini in Italy, the fascist tyrant, he was popular. Adolf Hitler, we all can go to history channels. We see history channel documentaries with tens of thousands of Germans. What were they saying, Alvin? Hail Hitler. He was likable. He was likable. So this is a false dynamic, as our brothers even said, because I know what they're talking about. We don't need any more dimples in Dominica. We need honest men and honest women. We need lawful behavior. We need institutions that will protect our constitution and our foreign affairs from criminals and bandits. We don't need people who come and mama guy and sweet talk and CO and so on to mislead boys and girls and use them if they have to get a scholarship. Is that what we want in Dominica? That's the government we have in Dominica. To use young people before they get a scholarship, to abuse them. Are we proud of that? Is that what we wanted independence for? So we could have a regime like that? So tonight I've made it very plain. I'm not looking for any cheap popularity. We have as a people to accept that unless we can change the content of our character and stop giving lawlessness a pass, stop giving criminal behavior a pass, stop giving disrespect a pass, stop giving racial prejudice a pass, stop giving class prejudice a pass, stop giving the exaltation of foreigners over Dominica a pass, we shall never know peace in Dominica and we shall never know progress in Dominica. And that's the reality. And likability has nothing to do with it. It has to do with the content of our character and our willingness or lack thereof to elect men and women based on principle, not on what they can give us, and not on the false promises they make.
And thanks a lot, Gabriel, for that. Lambi, I'm getting close to a point now where we have to start taking closing remarks. But I wanted to ask you whether you have any calls that you would like to take now. If not, If you have a call or two that you'd like to take now, we can do that before I go over to Alvin. Okay, so let's take a couple calls, Lambi. Let's hear them.
The call on the overseas lines, please go ahead.
Yes, Lambi, good evening, and good evening to Mr. G and the panel.
And caller, please be sparing with your time, okay? Because we've got short time.
Okay, Lambi. Lambi, listen to this, right? A leader must have a vision. And Roosevelt still have got no vision, Lambi. For example, he could find 11 tankers to use Dominican flag and sell oil from Iran to China. But he cannot get any one of these tankers to fly Dominican flag and use these tankers to ship our water. I heard Gabriel say he give him a book about Singapore. Roosevelt not going to use that model of Singapore. His model is the hyena model, 90-10. 90% for himself and 10% for the rest of Dominica. Now, one of your panel talk about St. Kitts. St. Kitts had the highest rate per GDP in terms of the debt. And a Dominican Thompson Fountain is who helped St. Kitts and turn it around. So we have a lot of people as competent that can do the job, but that business of like, how somebody can like you or you like somebody and the person living you hungry. You can't find a job. You can't pay your rent. What kind of likable business? Lambi, you tell me don't stay, so I won't stay. Thank you so much.
And thanks a lot for that. I really appreciate that contribution from the caller. Lambi, you want to take another call?
Hello.
Caller, please
Hello.
go ahead. Yeah.
Hello, good night, Lambert Charles.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good night, Mr. Gregoire, and good night to your esteemed panel.
All right.
Gentlemen, I know the time is very short at this time. I just want to commend you, gentlemen, for the love, the passion that you all have for this country, the country of your birth. But, I just want to comment briefly on what I heard from a man who is supposed to be a man of the cloth. And it is really sad. But you know what? It has been said that in the last days, we're going to have a lot of false prophets. Because for a man of God to be calling this program after listening to the level of disgust that has taken place tonight with gentlemen who understand what is going on in this country, and to be coming forth with this foolishness, according to Alvin Thomas, about likability, and even attempt to use the Bible to justify this. It is sad. I know he's a Dominican. I know this gentleman very well. And one of the things I have observed about this gentleman over the years is a level of pomposity. And I'm saying to him tonight, I know he's still listening. He better get down on his knees and humble himself. Because you cannot be a man of God, a man of the cloth, who is in charge of a flock and would want to lead them down a likability road over honesty, integrity. This is baffling to me. So, gentlemen, I just want to commend you all for the work that you're doing and continue being patriotic to this country. Our country needs you, and I know that you all will do everything that is possible to ensure that good order gets back to this country. God bless you all and your families. Thank you.
God bless you too. And thanks for the contribution. Lambi, you want to take another one?
Yes. Caller, be brief. Go ahead, please, with your call.
Good evening, Lambi.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening to Mr. G. And not in the studio, but on the program. Gentlemen, that point there about the likability thing, I totally agree with you all, because the Honorable Prime Minister was a minister in the Labour Party government for about 4.5 years before he became, after the death of Pierre Charleston, he became leader. And during that time, I never heard anybody, he was just in there as a regular minister. I never heard anybody saying that he was handsome or he was pretty or they wasn't calling him, they wasn't saying anything. All that big affection came about when he became prime minister of the country, because they realized that he's now controlling the money. So it's a big money thing, and everybody wants him to hear, well, you know how we say now, oh, they love him. I know women in Portsmouth right here where I live who would not watch their husband or their better half in the eye and say, I love you. But you hear them on the radio, I love you, my prime minister, I love you. This is all a game. And this whole likability thing has absolutely nothing to do, because if right now, if Skerritt's money stream, if it cuts down and he gets to the rank of like being the opposition, classification of money, we would see how much love we would be hearing about. So this is all a farce. It's all a make-believe kind of phrase. And I don't believe in the likability thing. I believe it's all about the money. He's controlling the money, so everybody's after him. That's it, folks.
Right. So, gentlemen, I know there's so much more we can say, but, all good things must come to an end. I wanted to go over to Dion, Dr. George, to sort of give any final comments and sort of wrap up,
Well, good. Yeah, thank you so much. In fact, I think there is a consensus here that likability is not the leading factor. In fact, some of the panelists says it's no factor at all. Well, I'm not sure if I'll say it's no factor at all. Like I have said, it's not the leading factor. And I think there's a consensus that other things like electoral reform, campaign finance reform, and financing of the election and bringing in voters, these are the main issues that led to a change in government. But there are established theories in political science, and Dominica is no exception, that governance, favorability, and a message of hope is a trio formula that is successful in private sector and public sector. And if I had to give any strategist advice to any political party, that these are three things that they would have considered as well, independent of the corruption that is going on in the country. And so we cannot groupthink and say, okay, we have a consensus and that's it. We have to be broad. We have to consider the core issues, yes, but we cannot be naive of other issues as well. And I think it's important to mention that. But I want to leave my closing comments to say that I appreciate the historical perspective from Dr. Andre. I appreciate the nuances that Alvin brought in, and of course, my good brother Gabriel bringing all this legal perspective, particularly when it comes to the passport sales and the kind of concerns that happen in international relations, as it happens with persons who are now caught as financing attack against the US. That is very, very serious. That has to be looked at very closely. Sheridan, I hope our contribution tonight would have bring some enlightenment to the people of Dominica. I think if members of both parties are listening, that they would consider that to be a sort of a collaborative effort for the best of Dominica, and no hatred. And I want to thank you so much for the opportunity, and thank my other panelists. Lambi, happy birthday to you, and good night.
And before I let you say good night, Dion, I'm sure I want to give you a further opportunity. Just shout out a little bit to your good folks in Salisbury. They always look forward to hearing a little word from you. So you might want to just, give a little shout out there. I know you always empathize with what happened to them in December 2019, I think it was.
Yes, so absolutely. I think the world will hear what has happened to Salisbury, and they'll continue to hear. I believe that there needs to be regress, and we will continue working for that regress. So, of course, the people of Salisbury were ambushed a night before the election. They were tear gassed. There are evidence of live bullets. In fact, 2 persons got shot. And clearly, that cannot go unnotified, right? And so I want to let the people of Salisbury know that we stand in solidarity with them. We love them. My heart is in Salisbury. And a good shout out to the people of Salisbury and the people of Dominica by extension.
Yeah, so clearly the whole question of likability does not prevent likable people from sending bullets behind Salisbury people. So that is clearly something that you want to keep in mind, right? So now, Alvin, I wanted to go over to you to sort of, final remarks, and let's sort of try to wind up.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. G. And like my fellow panelists, again, let me just say it was indeed a pleasure to be part of that discussion and to say thank you to the callers who call. Of course, that is what democracy is all about. In a democracy, you have various views, various points of view. I live in Georgia, in Atlanta, and I had the distinct privilege to meet the late John Lewis, who was a civil rights activist in Atlanta and served in the U.S. Congress for many years. I was fortunate to have met him on 2 occasions. And just prior to his passing, there is a book that was published in his honor called John Lewis Carry On, The Reflections for a New Generation. And this is an individual who went through a lot, but never gave up and always saw that there was a light within the tunnel. And there are various areas in the book that he captures and he encapsulates. And let me end on 3 of those: hope, on faith, and on living a legacy. And on hope, which I think was alluded to earlier, I think Irving made mention and Gabriel, never ever lose hope. I'm saying to my Dominican people listening, never ever lose hope. Never ever give up the faith, and be willing and ready to walk those last steps to help redeem our society, Dominica, to move us closer to the creation of a loving community. Hope is a feeling so deep in your heart, in the recesses of your body, that you know that good will triumph. It is a trust in the divine and the laws of the universe that things will work out as they should. It may be long in coming, and you may not see it in your lifetime or in that of your children or grandchildren. However, you must do all that you can during your time here to make things better and then pass the torch to the next generation. When you have hope, you hold on to something so powerful that it almost wills it to happen. Hope also puts your mind at ease because you're putting your faith in a higher power. Again, as a JCI senator, one of our tenets is faith in God gives meaning and purpose to human life. And on the question of faith, faith is having complete trust and confidence in something or someone. Sometimes it means having trust in something you cannot see, touch, or feel. For that reason, faith can defy logic and reason. And I will say, though, that we have that legacy, as I said earlier, to do what we need to do for our people in Dominica. We're living in very tumultuous times. Coming out of COVID-19, we see the havoc it has created on our economies, on the world, as a matter of fact. And in saying so, I just want to extend my old, sympathies to those who have lost ones as a result of COVID. You mentioned earlier in the program that we're now up to 30. And to say to the people of Dominica to hold strong, keep that faith, keep that hope, and to complement the courage of, as I said, the young men like Munsewi, that there is a light within the tunnel. And whatever we can do in our little way, in our little time that we have here on planet Earth, let's do it to promote humanity.
Yes, and Alvin, just to put it back on the record again, I mean, when we talk about 30 people who have died, COVID-related deaths, over the past 2 to 3 months, remember 2-3 months ago, we had 0 deaths, and we're now at 30. And as a matter of fact, at least 2 of those 30 people are cherished centenarians. At least 2 of them have passed because of this COVID. So I think it's very important, and Dominica should take this very, very seriously. And we need to protect ourselves from this. I know the vaccine has worked, and I have taken it. And I think those who feel that they should take it should take it. But I think people should inform themselves and make a decision to do that because it is working. Now,
absolutely.
Yeah, as I go to you, Gabriel, just to work on what Alvin said. Alvin said that, these groups, the young people like Monse, they should be taken very seriously. And in fact, what we've done, there is a program which was started some time ago. Every Thursday afternoon, here our friend Zari Manuel, he comes on from around 4:15 to 5 in the afternoon every Thursday, another program on young people. It's young people talking. And so he's doing, I think he's part of the Moon Saving Group as well. But Gabriel, in addition to that, I know you would have had conversations about what more we can do in the radio station to give a voice to young people. So maybe you might want, as you close, you might want to talk about a little bit in your closing remarks. Your mic. You need to unmute your mic, Gabriel.
Sorry about that. Thank you very much, Sheridan, for the opportunity to serve in this illustrious panel with Irving and Brother Alvin and Brother Dion. Happy birthday again to you, Brother Lambert. Many more. I want to say to our listening audience that when Irving and I were teenagers, that's when we met. Same with Brother Al. And that's when the independence movement was on. So the young people of our time, we stood to our duties and we served our country. Now, young Dominicans, it is your time now. It's your turn to similarly stand to your duties. And I'm asking now the ownership of Q95 to avow itself this opportunity, or avail itself rather of this opportunity, and make this vow tonight to put on this radio station a program for students called Students for Progress, or Students in Defense of Liberty, or the Student's Voice, so we can cultivate, similarly among our young people, a duty towards the country, respect for people of African descent, respect for people of Carib or Kalinago descent, respect for people of Dominican descent, wherever they may come from, be it Marigot, Vacas, or Granby, to move away from this racial prejudice and color prejudice of the labor of the so-called, the Skerrit Party, I'll call it that, to move away from that, to really educate yourselves by engaging media, by teaming, by organizing a federation of students, so you again can do what Brother Dion George talked about, which is to institutionalize the different levels of power so you can have a voice in your country, in our country. Because disorganized, on the side of the road, smoking or drinking or carrying on or beating up each other or getting involved in gangs, that is not going to help you. That is not going to help the country. But if you come together, if you respect yourself, if you respect your parents, if you work hard, if you stay away from drugs, if you stay away from violent behavior and misconduct, if you stay away from idle politicians who will try to mama-guy you and blue you and bamboozle you, mislead you and use you, abuse you, abuse you, discard you. If you can avoid that sort of deviation and instead stand for duty, stand for country over self, country over party, we will have, as Brother Alvin so well said, hope that will make itself manifest in a better Dominica. At this time, as we approach the so-called independence of Dominica, because we are not independent when we've had our state captured by the money laundering elite that is now in power, we do not have independence. I humbly say to Dominicans, forget it. We're not an independent nation. We do not have a working judiciary. We do not have a police force that is impartial and professional. We do not have a professional civil service. We do not have a government that's responsive to the needs of the Dominican people and is law-abiding in way of diplomacy and abiding by the Vienna Convention and the laws of lawful nations. We don't have that. It's the first time I've said it, but the facts are staring us in the face. Where are our diplomats? Zampoli? Where are diplomats? Montferred? Where are diplomats? Maduke? Are you kidding me? Nature Island? When our rivers have been disemboweled, the veins of our country disemboweled, gutted like you got the Balau in Lotbo and so on. Let's be, Dominicans, let's wake up and let's be real. Let's be real. Let's stop engaging in mediocrity and hypocrisy. Let's be real. Let's be real. Independence, and you don't have a national library? Are you kidding me? The library that we knew growing up, where is that? Alvin, where is that? Irving, where is that? Sheridan, Lambie, where is that? Are you kidding me? After offers were made by Dominicans in the diaspora like ourselves to help rebuild the library, rejected. So we now must remember some of our greats. I want to remember Lennox Honeychurch. Oftentimes he's been criticized for being quiet. I want to thank Lennox Honeychurch publicly for having written about Dominican history to have it be that Black people knew about their history in ways that they did not before. And so Irving and I have continued in that tradition. I want to thank Polly Patullo, who, like Lennox, wrote about the Maroons. She wrote about the Maroons in the Maroon trials. Your time is done now. Lennox wrote in the Forest of Freedom. I want to thank Brother Thompson Fontaine, our illustrious economist, who's now on the run. What did he do? Did he sell passports? What did he do? Did he arm terrorists in Benghazi while posing as a Dominican diplomat? No, because he stood up for democracy, he's now on the run. It's a warrant for his arrest. Or illustrious economist. But he wrote a brilliant book, The Maroons of Dominica, 1764-1818, Resistance, Rebellion, and Freedom from Slavery. Most brilliant book by a Dominican. Is it on the curriculum of the State College? Dr. Donald Peters, PhD, my dear friend. Is it on the college curriculum at the State College? I guess not, because he's a wanted man, so you won't put it in the State College. That's the kind of country we have now, where they have the guts to talk about history and culture and independence, and your brilliant sons and daughters are run away, treated like dogs in your own country. That's the reality we face with this so-called cabal. So I remember Lennox, I remember Polly Patullo, I remember Bernard Wilshire, I remember Dr. Para Rivera and the others who sought to teach us. Yes, Julian Johnson, why don't you speak up? You were cabinet secretary. Are you quiet now? Hubert Charles, you taught us history. Henry Volney, you taught us history. Where are you guys now? What are you, as you get into your senior years, are you forgetting that which you taught us? I give a wonderful welcome to Alvin Bully. He always held our flag high and has never let it down. God bless him. Always, honorable man. And to all our teachers who taught us well. We are coming back to do service and duty because you taught us well. We're coming back to do duty and service. We did not betray our country. We did not steal from our country. Alvin did not go to Georgia to bring down the name of our country. Irving did not go to Canada to bring down the name of this country, nor did Dr. George. They are exemplary Dominicans. They are exemplary Dominicans, as are the majority, the overwhelming majority of Dominicans overseas who help support Dominica because our economy has been destroyed by this maniac. They are exemplary Dominicans who have emblazoned a trail of good deeds, which we can all justifiably feel proud. What we cannot feel proud about is for allowing ourselves as a people to fall so low that we hate each other because of the party that is in power telling us to hate the party that is in opposition. That we look at Dominicans because they do not support the tyranny. They are now called enemies of the state. Tyranny. Thank you, Alvin Thomas, for these wonderful books you brought to our attention. Thank you for reminding us about Singapore and Lee Kuan Yew. Dominicans, I will conclude by saying, folks in Moon Sevier and in your other organizations, rally for your country. Stand up for your country. The Maroons fought and died. The Kalinago warriors fought and died so we could have some freedom today. Let us not betray our destiny, which is one of liberty and prosperity. Thank you very much.
Yes, and thanks for that, Gabriel. And as was said earlier by Alvin, reminded us that in fact, we're going to be 50 in 7 years' time as a country. So we're 7 years away from our 50th century as an independent country. And you ask the question, what are we doing to prepare for that? Are we going to, when we're 50 years old, say that we're worse off than when we were 43 years old? As we're saying now that we may be worse off when we're 43 than we were when 20 years ago? Is that going to be the pattern, or are we going to look to the countries that have built up their GDP and are better off? Their people are better off, and many of our people are migrating to those countries to have a better life. Is that what it is? Or do we want to go back to the days when people were looking to Dominica in terms of our primary health care, looking to come to Dominica because our country was moving and moving ahead? Now we're not marking time. It's as if we're reversing, you know. So, I mean, in terms of, as I go to Dr. Andre for his closing remarks, I want to just reflect on this because as a people, we're going to be 50 years old as an independent country in 7 years' time. What are we looking to do down there? Are we going to indulge in the same pattern of conduct that gives us the deliverables that makes up, keeps us the way we are in the living standards and the quality of life? Is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to ask ourselves a question at this point and say, listen, as somebody said, maybe it's time to add some action to the talk because there's been a lot of talking going on, but somebody was saying, where's the action to go with the talk? And somebody said, these young people, this young group are doing something about it. So as I said, we are going to want to give the young people a bigger voice on the radio. So I will discuss with Gabriel and we'll talk about it, see what it is we can do to do that. And Alvin, I know you may want to join us on that and so on. So I think it's important. Irving, as you close, I know that many things you have on your mind. I mean, you're a man who is a writer of our history and many history about all kind of people. And then, we've been talking, and I hope Gabriel will be able to join us. And we did speak about it doing this series of lectures on our leaders. I mean, from Frank Barron, these young people today, do they remember who Frank Barron is? He was the first chief minister of Dominica. They do not know anything about him. So we'll try to do this lecture series on all of our leaders from Barron to Leblanc to Patrick John to Oliver Seraphin to Edison James to, Virginia and so on and come down the road all the way down to Mr. Skerritt. And I think we should be able to do a good analysis of all these, their eras, their legacies, and what they've stood for in their lives and times. So I'm looking forward to that series. We could start as early as next week if we want to, if the time permits us. But so we'll have to discuss that with Gable, and we'll see how we go with that. But Irvin, as I go to you for your closing remarks.
Well, thank you, Mr. G, and let me thank our esteemed panelists. It's a great honor for me to be in such illustrious company. Let me thank your listeners who've graced us and given us the wonderful privilege of opening their homes or their devices to us and who've listened to us. And whether or not they agree with us or haven't agreed with us, that is not the issue, but at least they have allowed us into their edifices, and for that we're grateful. Much has been said about the fact that we're on the eve of our 43rd, I believe, anniversary of political independence. If after 43 years of independence, we don't have a vision of who we are or what type of personality we need to lead us in these most difficult of times, then quite frankly, we have to ask ourselves, then why are we here in the first place? We have to be motivated by history. We have to be animated not only by Dominican history, but other world leaders. We have to ask ourselves, why have certain countries been more successful than we've been? We have to ask ourselves, what do we need to do to get to the next level? And let me offer you a vision, because I have no magic formula. But let me share with you what I perceive to be the gold standard as to what we require in terms of making transformative changes in the body politic, in the lives of all Dominicans, irrespective of their political affiliation. We need the honesty, as I've already said, of a Nazarene, someone who has humility as if it was a badge of honor. We need, for example, the integrity. For example, the integrity of someone, elderly person who is sick, perhaps disabled, perhaps an amputee, who lie in relative poverty and suffering, who can alleviate that suffering by just saying, oh, how great thou art. But who decided, like that Calypsonian sang in her song, I will die with my integrity. That's the type of personality we need. We need someone, quite frankly, who is very empathetic, someone who can alleviate suffering, who's touched by it, who wish to transform it. We'll need someone who can be educated by the parable of the 10 lepers. Someone who can make that sacrifice, go against the grain, who will not only give to the grotto, but will give or seek out those in every community, irrespective of who they are, and assist them. We need someone with the humility of a Mahatma Gandhi. He made his own clothes as a leader of India. He made his own clothes. We need the humility of another leader who once famously said, I have only one back. You can take that wonderful shirt you bought from Bai Trini, Susun Cleaway, the finest of clothing and threads. I don't need it. I only have one back. We need that type of, it's almost tangible. We need someone with a sense of purpose. Both Alvin and Gabriel talk about Lee Kuan Yew, seeking advice and the direction from leaders all over the world with one central purpose. How can I make my country better? We're not talking about leaders who go in the darkness of night, who go into every type of city, edifice, seeking people fleeting or fleeing from the claws of the law, but persons who are animated by the daylight of wisdom. Persons who have your humility to seek help, know their shortcomings, and say by the, what's the saying again? By the thing of my brow, I will ensure that we will take our rightful place in this community of nations. That's what we seek. We need courage. We need courage of a boy with a slingshot. So let's face it, the parable was not when this boy with a slingshot saw this Goliath with a club. He didn't go up to Goliath and say, Gasso, I'd always like you. Probably in a voice nicer than Whitney Houston, I always love you. He stood his ground. And he stood his ground irrespective of the consequences because he had a conviction based on his moral fiber. That's what we need. We also need courage, talked about. We need the patriotism. Someone who will sing loudly that wonderful song of King Short Shirt of Antigua. Is it Short Shirt, Mr. G, you should know, or Long Shirt? I'm not sure which one. I was born in this land. I was die in this land. Nobody go run me from where me come from. Nobody go run me. Nobody go run me. That's what we need. We need someone who will stand up on the shoulder of his own principles, clothed in righteousness, clothed in conviction, clothed in purpose, untainted by the enticements handed to him as a platter, the offer of jobs, the offer of scholarship, the offer of positions, the offer of an opportunity to go on a platform and castigate the opposition for a mess of potash. That's what we need at this juncture of history. Thank you.
And thanks a lot for that, Irving. Gentlemen, we've had a lot of fun tonight. I hope we put out some information out there which some people will have absorbed and found useful. Gabriel, we wanted to say a quick last
Yes,
thing?
and I, of course, everybody's spoken wonderfully well, but I just got a note from the pastor. He felt that he has been, maligned. He just wanted the public to know that he did not mean to say that likability is the only factor, but his basic point was, in his view, that it made a difference and we should consider it. But he didn't want it to be, he didn't want the event to end this evening with the public believing that he was saying that that's all that matters. I think what he's saying to me in his note is that character matters. And he wanted Irving to know, and Al and Dion and others in the public to know, that he's a man of character And he believes that right now, character is what matters. He just wanted to make the point that it is true, people do look at the book's cover. It is true, they look sometimes at the $7,000 suits and the fancy house and so on the hill and so on. But anyway, I digress. He just didn't want to
just one parting comment. Again, I know the pastor. I know Dr. Mitchell. I know his past. I knew his father when I was a little boy growing up in Portsmouth. He has made tremendous progress. He has acquitted himself very well in life. So we're certainly not going to hold that against him. He's made his view. He's made his view. I don't know that we're going to crucify him, but respectfully, it is important that when we take a different perspective, that we say it openly. But again, as I said, and I prefaced my remarks initially by saying, I know this man. He's a man of honor.
Yeah, I endorse that as well. I mean, our views expressed here is not intended to be personal or vilify in any way whatsoever. As passionate as we might be in what we say, like Irving said, we are all, and Gabriel and Dion, and you, Mr. G, we are all doing that in the best interest of Dominica. We no matter how long we've been outside, Dominica is home. Our heart is there. And compared to what happens elsewhere, what we are saying, question again, are you better off now than you were 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, or 15 years ago? This is the fundamental question that every Dominican needs to answer as we move into our 43rd anniversary of independence. Are you better off now? Let's answer that question.
Well, Alvin, when we do the lecture series, I think the pastor will have another opportunity to call, and we'll welcome his call. And I hope that he will take the opportunity then to expand on all the things he was hoping to have said. In other words, he did not mean to say that likability was the only other issue. So he will have an opportunity to explain the other things. And I'm sure that he'll be able to do that in a very, very brilliant way. So we'll be looking forward to that. I thought his engagement was good. But nonetheless, gentlemen, I want to thank everyone for the contribution here tonight. I want to thank our callers who didn't get much of an opportunity to call. I want to thank all the folks who are on Facebook. I didn't get to mention all of their names because the conversation got so absorbing that we kind of lost track of time, and it's already after 10. And so we should have been gone a long time. But I really want to thank Gabriel and you, Lambi, and Dion and Alvin and Irving. I want to thank you so much for the contribution made here tonight. I certainly have learned a lot tonight, and I believe that many of our listeners have learned something. Everybody may not necessarily agree with everything that we say, and that's not the intention. But you notice that whenever we start this program, we always say no anger, no malice, no divisiveness, just being very civil and caring and loving. And this is what the intention is, to provide the information and the education that we whatever it is that we have, we want to share it with the rest of our Dominican people, wherever you are in your neck of the woods, anywhere in the world. And so that is what we intend to do. And really and truly, we're not in the business of singling out people to character assassinate anybody, but you have to tell the facts, and sometimes you have to say the facts as they are. And so that is what we have to always try to do that, okay? So, gentlemen, thank you so much. Sherwin, Lambi, thank you. Our listeners, thank you. And let me just say good night, everybody.
Good night.
Bless you.
Okay, good night, folks.
Thank you, guys.
Good night.
Thank
God bless you.
Bye. All right.
Bye.
Okay.